Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Parallel Deku. Back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Was Dance YouTuber? Now before starting, please give this video a like. And subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Izuku wasn't particularly paying attention to what Mina was blabbering about. He'd gotten used to her chattering over the past years since they became classmates, and through Kacchan, you pretty good friends. He kept eating his lunch in silence, thinking about their upcoming classes, up until, yeah, he's F-hot, not gonna lie. The sandwich he was holding stopped halfway to his mouth and his eyes widened in surprise, his gaze snapping to his childhood friend. Did he hear that correctly? I know, right? Mina chirped excitedly, her pink curls bobbing as she fidgeted in her seat next to Kacchan, like she couldn't contain herself. He's not as good as you in terms of technique, but damn, those legs. Kacchan hummed in agreement and Izuku felt his mouth fall open. Kacchan, think some guy is hot. A spark of jealousy flickered to life in his eye, and he held his sandwich a bit tighter than necessary. Who was it? Someone from their school. Was it someone he was practicing with? He'd never shown interest in anyone before. His videos give me life. Mina continued wistfully. I wish he would upload more often though. Wait a second. Videos? What are you guys talking about? Izuku piped up, successfully getting the pair's attention. Kacchan had a deadpan look on his face as if the topic was something trivial, like he didn't just admit that he thought some guy was hot. Mina on the other hand got even more excited, if that was even possible. It's this YouTuber I stumbled upon a few days ago, she said, picking up her phone from the table and opening up the app. I'll show you, just give me a sec. He's a dancer and he's not too well known, although his choreography is always amazing no matter what he dances to. Then she made a high-pitched squeal. There's a new video. Let's watch it. She pulled up a video of a young man, seemingly teen, dancing to a popular new hit, and Izuku felt his heart drop to his stomach. His skin prickled and felt clammy as he started sweating nervously, not daring to move or make a noise. His eyes were glued to screen but he didn't see anything. His brain was too busy going into overdrive and freaking out. Because Mina was showing him a video of himself. The one he uploaded last night. How on earth did she find this? He had barely a few thousand views, he wasn't popular, and it's not like he was even any good, especially compared to her or Kacchan. That move was CC as hell, Kacchan said, and that was when Izuku realized that his childhood friend, his longtime crush, also leaned in to watch the video Mina was showing him. Izuku said intelligently, his face heating up. And that was when Kacchan actually glanced up at him, watching his face curiously. What the F is wrong with you, nerd? Nothing. Izuku replied quickly, then he strategically took a bite of his sandwich so he wouldn't have to talk. Internally, he was screaming. Kacchan rolled his eyes and turned back to watch the video. It was only a minute and a half long, yet to Izuku it felt like an hour. He tried not to wince as Kacchan and Mina picked his choreography apart, analyzing his moves and pointing out his mistakes, but as the video ended he anxiously awaited their verdict. He was doing this to impress Kacchan, after all. I wanna watch it again, Mina said as she pressed replay, and Kacchan leaned away from her, apparently satisfied with only seeing the video once. This guy is amazing, I can't get enough. Izuku swallowed the bite he took from his sandwich nervously, and he looked at his childhood friend. He doesn't have a lot of views though, so he can't be that good, he mumbled, self-conscious. I think you guys are way better than him. I bet if he took the time to actually learn how to edit his videos he'd be a hit, Kacchan replied with a scoff, and Izuku was taken aback by the unashamed praise coming from the blonde's mouth. He obviously has talent and he put a lot of effort into getting this good. All he's missing is a brain to make good use of what he has. Izuku was staring at his childhood friend, astonished. Did he really just say that Izuku was talented? Him, who called Izuku clumsy and useless all his life. How do you know he put a lot of effort into getting good? Mina cut off his train of thought, sounding suspicious. I only showed you his channel a few days ago, Bakugo. If Izuku didn't know better he'd have sworn Kacchan's ears were turning pink. It's obvious, the blonde said, sounding annoyed. His first video is from 4 years ago, and he's been uploading since pretty frequently. Even a blind person can see how much he's improved since then. Izuku blushed again, taking another bite of his sandwich, trying to focus on his chewing instead of his heart that was hammering in his Kacchan? Kacchan was complimenting him. Ooh, Mina said in reply, obnoxiously stretching the syllable. Explodo boy has a crush. Izuku was ready to be swallowed up by the ground. Please, let it open up and make him disappear into the abyss. So what? Was Kacchan's irritated reply, voice level rising along with his anger. I know about your crush on Ryukyu, so shut the hell up. You're not better than me. Izuku was already halfway out the dining hall when Mina's uncontrollable laughter sounded behind him, followed by Kacchan's loud cursing and the sound of plates clattering onto the floor. His mind was racing a mile a minute. It was only a matter of time before he found out. Was he going to be disappointed? Probably. The memory of Kacchan making fun of him as he tried copying his moves when they were kids was still vivid in his mind. The other boy never thought he could actually be good at dancing too. And even if their complicated past was well and buried now, having made up years ago, the fact that Kacchan didn't believe in him still stung. Izuku quickened his steps down the corridor, evading students left and right as he headed towards his locker. Kacchan would be sad to find out the dancer he had a crush on was just useless little Deku. Izuku just had to keep it a secret then. At first, Katsuki didn't even realize that anything was different. He went on with his days like usual, ignoring the extras fawning over him everywhere he went. It didn't matter if he was at school or at dance practice, there was always someone trying to get his attention and annoying him to hell and back. No, at first he didn't notice anything was different. But when he did, it left him puzzled. Because this had never happened before. The nerd was avoiding him. Katsuki narrowed his eyes as he watched Deku slip out from the classroom literally a second after the bell rang, looking like he was running for his life. It didn't really make sense. The whole situation just didn't compute for a while, Deku avoiding him. There was just no way. Because even back then, even at their worst, the idiot never went out of his way to avoid Katsuki. Even when he pushed him away and hurt him, Deku came running back, chasing after him, and he never, ever ran away from him. He mindlessly grabbed his books as he stood up from his desk, still deep in thought. He only looked up when Izuku tapped his shoulder, his usual happy smile directed at Katsuki. What's up, bro? The red-haired teen asked, falling into step next to him as he started making his way out of the classroom. You looked super serious just now. Everything okay? There's something wrong with the nerd, the blonde said, pushing past a group of first years that gathered near the door and walking down the corridor. It's pissing me off. Midoriya. Shitty hair asked curiously. What do you mean? He's acting all shifty, the blonde explained, and he's avoiding me. I'm gonna find out what he's up to. Yeah, you should probably talk to him, the redhead agreed. That doesn't really sound like him. I hope he's alright. Katsuki rolled his eyes. I bet it's something totally stupid that he's freaking out over. He always overthinks everything. I guess that's true. Unfortunately for Katsuki, Deku had been exceptionally vigilant in evading him throughout the day. It irritated the blonde how he didn't realize it before, because now that he noticed, it was terribly obvious. The nerd left every class as soon as the bell rang, and he couldn't be found during breaks, not even at lunchtime. Deku was suspiciously missing from their usual table when Katsuki sat down, and he didn't actually know why that pissed him off so much. He didn't care what the nerd did in his free time. It wasn't his business. So why did he keep glancing towards the entrance? When the day was finally coming to an end, the dark clouds that had been gathering outside since the morning trembled, and with a loud accompanying thunder, poured heavy rain over their school, water hitting the windows loudly. The students all watched the rain outside mesmerized, whispers and murmuring filling the classroom as the ones who were stupid enough to not prepare for the weather exchanged worried sentences. Katsuki, because he was the best at everything, was always prepared for things like this. And that was why he didn't even spare a single thought on the weather. His mind was more occupied by the green-haired idiot sitting in front of him, mumbling up a storm in the wake of the sudden downpour. He could only make out a few words, soaked, mom, worried and sick, but it was enough to make it obvious that Deku, like the dumb nerd he was, didn't bring an umbrella. Or a raincoat, for that matter. Katsuki, on the other hand, had a hooded rainproof jacket, and also an umbrella that he had stashed away in his locker just in case ages ago. The blonde was determined to not let the nerd get away before he talked to him. And helping him out was the perfect opportunity he needed. He just had to get Deku to stay long enough for him to grab the umbrella and give it to him. Unfortunately, his plan fell through the minute class ended, with the shitty nerd speeding past all their classmates and very likely running down the corridor so he could leave without talking to anyone. Katsuki cursed under his breath and darted after him, grabbing his jacket from the back of his chair absent-mindedly. He needed to get to the nerd before he got away. He hurried past the students that were loudly chattering as they all slowly left their classrooms, evading them with ease. He didn't bother looking for Deku in the crowd. He just had to get to the entrance before the nerd and wait for him there. Hopefully the green-haired teen decided to visit his locker before he went back home, and didn't leave straight away, because if he did that, then Katsuki definitely missed him. And there was no way he was going to run after the shitty idiot in the pouring rain. He didn't have to wait long. He barely stood near the entrance for a few seconds when he saw that awful mop of green hair coming closer, eyes glued to the floor as he made his way towards Katsuki. Did he see him? Or was he lost in his thoughts? Did it even matter? Deku, Katsuki called the other teen's name as he got closer, voice confident and loud. At the sound of his voice, Deku flinched and his gaze snapped at the blonde. "Hi, Kacchan," the nerd greeted him, voice a bit shaky. "I didn't see you there." Katsuki narrowed his eyes as he observed his friend. He looked twitchy and nervous, and his eyes kept darting around, like he was looking for an escape route. "What the F is going on with you?" Katsuki asked eventually, going for blunt. "You've been acting weird." Deku's eyes widened comically at that. "Nothing," he replied, or rather, squeaked. He looked even more anxious than before, if that was even possible. "Nothing is going on." "Well, that sounds like a load of bullshit." "Kacchan, I promise you it's nothing." Katsuki scowled at the green-haired teen, irritated. "So why the F are you avoiding me then?" Deku gripped the straps of his backpack tightly, his knuckles turning white from the pressure. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than before. "I'm not avoiding you." Katsuki opened his mouth to protest and call him out on his bullshit again, but Deku continued quickly. "I'm not avoiding you specifically. I just have some stuff I need to deal with on my own. I haven't been feeling like socializing recently." They both fell silent at that, Katsuki watching the nerd quietly, mulling over the information in his head, while Deku started fidgeting under his gaze. If that was all then I'm going home," the green-haired teen said nervously, already starting to move past Katsuki. He didn't get far though, because the blonde's strong grip on his arm stopped him. "Where do you think you're going?" Katsuki asked. It was still pouring outside. What was this shitty idiot thinking? Deku asked, unsure. "Without an umbrella." The nerd gaped at him in surprise. "But how? Never mind," he sighed. "Yes. I forgot to bring it in the morning. But I can't wait until the rain stops. My mom is expecting me home early today." "It's AF downpour outside," Katsuki reasoned, face deadpan. "Your mom will understand. I'm sure she doesn't want you getting sick because you were stupid enough to walk home in this weather." "It's not just that," Deku replied, eyes cast downwards once again. "I promised her I'd do the grocery shopping today. She's been working a lot of extra shifts the past week. I want to help her out as much as I can." Katsuki let out a long, frustrated groan. "All right, what the hell?" He rolled his eyes, then held out the jacket he'd been holding since he left the classroom. "Take my F jacket then." The shitty nerd had the audacity to eye the piece of clothing as if it was going to attack him. He didn't even reach out to take it. "Why?" he asked, incredulous. "What do you mean why?" Katsuki snapped back, voice rising. "Because if you don't you're gonna get F sick." Deku blinked at him owlishly, then tentatively took the jacket. He held it in a bundle in his arms, staring at Katsuki like it was the first time he saw him. "But what about you?" he asked then, furrowing his eyebrows. "I have an umbrella in my locker. But I'm staying for practice anyways. The rain might stop by the time we finish." And with that, Katsuki turned away from the shitty nerd, intent on walking back to meet up with Mina and leave this idiotic situation behind him. He didn't know why he got so worked up over this. It's not like he needed Deku to be around him at all times. "Thank you, Kacchan," the nerd yelled after him, and Katsuki lifted a hand in acknowledgement, but didn't turn back to look at him. He just wanted to get away for now. And wasn't that ironic? Well, he needed to think. This day just wasn't making any sense. It was still raining heavily. The storm was slowly picking up in intensity, and Izuku pulled his borrowed jacket tighter around himself, burying his nose in the collar. The heady scent of burnt caramel, musk, and something else he couldn't quite pinpoint came together in a mixture of smells that Izuku had always associated with Kacchan, and the green-haired teen flushed red as he breathed it in. It was Kacchan's scent. Izuku sped up as he walked, wanting to get out of the rain as soon as possible, yet barely feeling the early spring chill around him. He wasn't paying attention as his legs lead him down the route he always took, his thoughts occupied by what transpired before he left school. Izuku blushed even more as he remembered Kacchan's thoughtful look and the way he had offered his jacket to him. He almost squealed as his mind reeled. Kacchan was worried about him. Sure, the blonde didn't explicitly say that, but Izuku could read between the lines. They had known each other since they were babies. He allowed himself a small smile as he kept walking home, a warm feeling settling in his Maybe this day wasn't so bad after all. The next morning Kacchan was waiting for him in front of his building, hands inside his pocket and a scowl on his face, looking very much like a delinquent that he never actually was. Izuku's heart started beating rapidly at the sight. "You're late," the blonde sneered at him, not even bothering with a greeting. "If we missed the train because of you, I'm gonna beat the SHT out of you." Good morning, Kacchan." Izuku chuckled nervously as he approached his friend. "Why are you here?" Don't get him wrong, it's not like Izuku didn't want Kacchan to walk him to school. Let's be real, it was a dream come true, but facts were facts, and the thing was, they stopped walking together like this years ago, pretty much after they had their first serious fallout in middle school. They just simply didn't do it anymore, even if they did make up when they both ended up going to the same high school. Kacchan was an early riser, and he preferred getting to school at least half an hour before anyone else, while Izuku liked to stay in bed for as long as he could. He guessed Kacchan just wanted to prepare for the day ahead with no one distracting him. Being the top student, and staying there, was strong work, after all. "Shut the F up already," Kacchan snapped at him, and Izuku's face flushed in embarrassment. Of course he was mumbling again. "Good going, Izuku. I'm here for my jacket." The blonde's eyes raked over Izuku's body and the boy shifted nervously. "Where is it?" Kacchan's eyes narrowed. "You forgot it upstairs or what?" Izuku broke eye contact, biting his bottom lip. What should he do? He really didn't want to give it back yet. It was the only thing he had from Kacchan, and, well, it smelled just like him. Okay, sue him. Yes, he slept in it. What else should he have done? Wash it. Lost it, he blurted out the first thing that came to mind. When he glanced up, Kacchan looked actually surprised. "You did what?" "I'm sorry," Izuku said, voice a bit higher than usual. He waved his hands around in a placating manner, taking a few steps back when he saw the building fury on Kacchan's face. Oops. Maybe that was the wrong thing to say. I'm so sorry." Izuku cut him off, deciding to just go with it and bowed deep in front of Kacchan. "Please don't be mad at me." There was no reaction for a while, just silence. Well, at least the blonde wasn't exploding on him, so that was good, right? "Tis whatever," Kacchan said then, turning away from Izuku and walking away from the building towards the station. "See when I will ever give you anything again. I'm really sorry." Izuku repeated his earlier sentiment, quickly scrambling after the irritated teen. "I'll buy you a new one." "Stop apologizing already," Kacchan shot back. "And I don't want anything from you. You have the shittiest taste in clothing." Izuku furrowed his eyebrows as he digested that. "What's wrong with my clothes?" Kacchan didn't dignify that with an answer, simply scoffing at him as they made their way to the station, walking side by side. It was nice, actually, walking like that with Kacchan again. He felt warm and fuzzy, and all he wanted to do was smile. He briefly wondered why they weren't doing this anymore, since they lived so close to each other. Izuku hated waking up early. He sneaked a glance at Kacchan, taking in his profile as they kept walking in silence. He felt his face heat up as he watched the other teen. Good. He was so handsome. The morning chill left his cheeks and nose slightly pink, his ash blonde hair swaying gently as he moved. His lips were pressed in a tight line and his appealing ruby-red eyes, well, they were looking straight at Izuku. He quickly glanced to his feet, face heating up even more at being caught staring. He silently prayed that the blonde would let it go, that he wouldn't call him out on it. He really didn't want to accidentally confess or something. Knowing himself, that really wasn't too far-fetched of an idea. Thankfully though, Kacchan didn't say anything all the way until they arrived at school, and then they split up, each going to their own lockers. The day passed without any incidents. And the next one too. And then the next one. Having calmed down after having almost been exposed by Mina, in the following days Izuku resumed posting his dancing videos just like before. He loved dancing, he always had. It was a part of himself just like his green locks or his freckles, and he wanted more than anything else to dance with Kacchan by his side. The blonde had always been mesmerizing, even from a young age. His sense of rhythm was amazing, and he took to dancing like a duck to water. He learned incredibly fast and was hardworking. He'd always been praised as a dancing prodigy. People had high expectations for someone as talented as him. He'll go to places, they had said. He's going to be famous someday. Izuku, on the other hand, was nothing to talk about. Yes, he had big dreams, but none of the talent Kacchan was blessed with. While the blonde danced, all Izuku did was trip and fall. He kept trying nonetheless, and he kept failing every day. Useless, they had said, and Izuku was listening. He was always listening. Poor boy has 2 left feet. He never let it really get to him though. It still hurt. It hurt so much. He remembered crying his eyes out after particularly strong days, but he never gave up. He kept trying and trying, spending all his time practicing. After Kacchan turned on him though sometime in elementary school, he kept it a secret. It happened by luck that he found an ad for dance lessons a few cities away. He managed to convince his mom to let him attend, and well, it really paid off. He could tell the difference. Where he had used to stumble before, now he felt the beat and moved with it effortlessly. Now, the music flowed in him like water from a tap he couldn't quite reach before, and now that it was open, it flooded him completely, soaking him in its melody. Izuku walked with purpose as he entered through the gates of Ketsubutsu High School. He headed straight for their gym where the rest of their dance team had already gathered. Izuku was the last to arrive, to no one's surprise. They had it easier, after all, they all, except for their team leader, went to Ketsubutsu. When Izuku arrived, a thin, blonde girl was in the middle of complaining to a tall, handsome guy with brown hair and steely eyes. "I can't believe the studio is still being refurbished," she huffed, throwing herself at the guy standing next to her. "I can't take another day practicing in this crappy gym." "Hi everyone." Izuku greeted them as he walked closer, beaming at his teammates. "How are you?" "Tatami is being annoying as usual," the brown-haired guy answered. "But I have to agree with her. I hate practicing here." "Don't worry, Shindo," Izuku smiled at him. "I'm sure we'll be back soon enough." "Let's hope you're right," Shindo said, pushing Tatami off his body and clapping his hands together with a smile. "Now that everyone is here, shall we begin?" Izuku felt refreshed and so full of energy, even after a full hour of dance practice. The competition they had been training for was only a month away, and this time he would also participate. He couldn't have been happier. He quickly took a shower then got dressed, but by the time he finished, he was the only one in the locker room. Well, apparently he was slower than he thought. Probably because he kept getting too caught up in his musings. He plugged his earphones in as he got ready to leave, turning his music on. His eyes lingered on the gym door as he passed by, unspent energy fizzling in his body. He stopped, considering. It really wouldn't hurt, right? He needed to upload a new video anyways. And this was the perfect place to do it. He nodded to himself, accepting his reasoning, then grabbed his camera from his backpack. He was so glad he decided to bring it with him, putting it down on the floor by the door, facing him. He also fished out a white face mask he always carried around just in case, slipping it on and hiding his features. He started the recording, then walked to the middle of the gym, pulling his hood over his head. He flicked through a few songs on his phone until he found the one he was looking for, then pressed play. He felt the beat drum in his veins, and he took a second to enjoy the feeling rush through him. His fingers twitched in anticipation. This was what he lived for. It was past 8 p.m. when Katsuki's phone pinged with a notification, alerting the teen who was already lying in bed, preparing to sleep. He rolled over to his nightstand to pick up the device, eyes lighting up in excitement as he saw the name of the channel that just uploaded another video. Dance for All. His new favorite YouTuber, and well, maybe crush. Who could blame him? The way the guy moved, it was hot as hell. He started the video, eyes narrowing in confusion at the weird setting. It was different from usual. It looked like the guy was in a school gym of all places, and he was missing his signature bunny mask. But what was even weirder was what the guy was wearing. Katsuki's eyes followed his movements intently, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Because it looked like the guy was wearing his jacket. But that was crazy, right? It was probably just a similar one, not the exact same one that Deku told him he lost. Katsuki's thoughts screeched to a halt as the dancer in the video lifted his arms, exposing the side of the jacket, where there was a clear patch of a different colored material. He remembered how mad his mom was when she found out he got into a fight again. She told him she wasn't gonna buy him a new jacket, he just had to make do with this one. She patched it up for him though, but didn't pay attention to how it actually looked like. Knowing her, the old hag was probably trying to make it look as ugly as possible. So yeah, Katsuki recognized that patch. He wasn't imagining things. It was his jacket. What the F? Contrary to popular belief, Bakugo Katsuki was not a morning person. He absolutely hated waking up before 10 a.m., and he never really got used to getting out of bed before sunrise during school days. If you told his classmates though, they would definitely laugh at you. Why is he here then before any of us arrive? They would say. He always looks well rested and ready to take on the day with no problems at all. And well, there was a reason why Katsuki made sure to arrive earlier than most of the students and even the teachers every single day. He had a method he perfected over the past few years, one he swore by and never abandoned. A method that was all but thrown out the window this morning, thanks to Dance for All and his F video Katsuki saw the previous night. He woke up feeling even worse than usual, a full-on headache pulsing behind his eyes, limbs weak as he groggily made his way to the kitchen. His brain only started to function after his fifth sip of coffee, leaning on the kitchen counter as he held onto his mug for dear life. Coffee was a vital part of his morning routine, and he always took the time to make a fresh pot every morning before he left for school. He drank half of it before leaving, filling his thermos with the rest and sipping from it all the way until he arrived at school. His mind was still preoccupied with trying to make sense of that stupid video when his classmates slowly started milling into the classroom, the bright chattering making him even more irritated than before. And this was why he always stuck to his F routine. Because without at least 20 minutes alone to prepare mentally for the day ahead before the extras arrived, his day, and his mood, was completely and utterly F up. He grumbled to himself angrily as he took another sip from his thermos, ignoring shitty hair and raccoon eyes as they greeted him cheerfully, then shared a puzzled look when he didn't react, not even in his usual angry manner. He lay down on his desk, covering his face with his arms folded in front of him, only peeking out every few seconds to look at the entrance, like he was waiting for someone. Because, well, he was waiting for someone. After what he saw the previous night, and in hindsight, after how Deku was acting before, it was no surprise that he was itching to talk to the nerd. What the F was the meaning of all this, anyways? Did Dance for All somehow find his jacket after shitty Deku lost it? Or was he F-mugged for it? The only other reasonable explanation was that Deku was Dance for All. And he kept Katsuki's jacket. He scowled angrily at the thought. That would mean that Deku, shitty F Deku, had been hiding a huge part of his life from Katsuki for years. Why keep it a secret? Katsuki felt his ST squeeze painfully. He thought they were over this CRP. They put their problems behind them already, they made up, Katsuki F apologized for being a shitty brat and they were friends now. It all felt meaningless though if Deku didn't trust him enough to share something like this with him. And what about that F jacket? Why keep it? Why lie about it to Katsuki to his face? What was the nerd even playing at? He felt like he was in middle school all over again. His rage was going overdrive, his fingers digging deep into the skin of his forearms. He wanted to punch that nerd in the face. As per usual, Deku was the last person to arrive before the bell rang, signaling the start of homeroom. Katsuki watched intently as the green-haired teen scurried to his desk, almost tripping over someone's backpack on the floor, then proceeding to bump his knee into his desk before he managed to sit down. Katsuki's anger left him in an instant, his shoulders relaxing as he leaned back in his own chair. What was he even thinking? He had the weird urge to laugh at the absurdity of the situation. He was working himself up over nothing. Useless, clumsy Deku being the hot and talented dance for all. Yeah, there was no way. Izuku blinked up at Kacchan as the other teen cornered him during lunch break, just before he entered the cafeteria. They were standing a bit off from the entrance, with Izuku leaning on a wall. Nervously and Kacchan staring at him with those intense BLD red eyes, his arms crossed at his sissy in front of him. Did you get mugged? Kacchan asked in a serious tone, eyes narrowing. Izuku's eyes widened comically, his voice coming out as a squeak. What? Kacchan didn't look put off by his reaction. He looked just as serious as before, eyes never leaving Izuku's face. I asked if you got mugged, you nerd, he repeated in a no-nonsense tone. Did someone steal my jacket from you the other day? Izuku let out a quiet oh when he realized what Kacchan was asking. But why was he asking? Wait, was this the conclusion the blonde reached after Izuku told him he lost the jacket? Izuku honestly had no idea how to react. On one hand, it would be easy to agree and move on, but on the other hand he really didn't want Kacchan to think that his jacket was lost forever. He was planning on giving it back one day. Maybe. You know you can tell me, right? Kacchan pressed, sounding a bit irritated. At what though? Izuku had no idea. I'm not gonna think any less of you if that happened. Izuku felt his face warm up at that. Kacchan was so nice to him. He'd been so wonderful these past few days. If he kept this up, Izuku's heart would surely burst from all the love he felt for his childhood friend. Thank you, Kacchan, Izuku said quietly, hands fumbling with the hem of his shirt. You don't have to worry about me though. I can take care of myself. Apparently not if you get mugged on your way back home, Kacchan scoffed. I'm surprised you didn't catch a cold going home without it. The rain was crazy that day. Izuku decided not to correct his assumption, chuckling nervously. I'm okay, Kacchan. Sorry about your jacket. I already told you to stop apologizing, the blonde replied, rolling his eyes. Let's just get lunch before we miss it completely. Kacchan. Deku was blinking up at him curiously, hands pulling on the straps of his yellow backpack, shifting it a bit. He looked so innocent and naive, just like a little kid. No wonder he got mugged. When Katsuki didn't reply, the nerd tilted his head a bit to the side as if to see him better. Why are you here? Katsuki felt anger flare up in his tea. What do you mean why am I here? He snapped at the other teen, then started walking towards the train station angrily. School is over so I'm obviously going home. No, I meant, Deku quickly fell into step beside him, why are you walking with me? Katsuki fell silent, debating telling the nerd that he was here to make sure he wasn't mugged again. But well, his pride decided to take over, because obviously admitting the fact that he was worried about Deku was embarrassing as hell. Felt like it, he said eventually, not even bothering to look at the nerd's face to see his reaction. He could imagine the happy smile covering the idiot's freckled face, because no matter the reason, Deku loved spending time with him. To this day Katsuki couldn't for the life of him figure out why. Deku cheered, and didn't Katsuki tell you? This shitty nerd. Always such a ray of sunshine. What did you think of this new formula we learned today? Miss Kiyama said, and off he went on another one of his tangents. Katsuki pretended not to pay attention, but he still listened carefully to everything his friend was saying. He would never admit it, but he really admired Deku's ability to analyze and take apart every single thing they learn at school. He wasn't at the top of his class like Katsuki was, but the blonde could respect the strong work and effort Deku put into studying. At least he was actually trying to get results now, unlike he did in middle school. The faint sound of music coming from the distance reached them as they walked, and Katsuki muted Deku's ramblings out in order to hear it better. A new popular hit was playing, and if Katsuki concentrated, he could hear loud talking and cheering coming from the same direction. From the direction of the station. Deku next to him also fell quiet as they approached the station, but Katsuki wasn't paying attention to him. His eyes were on the crowd that gathered in the park near the entrance, standing around in a wide circle and watching someone in the middle. Oh! Katsuki heard Izuku exclaim, and he glanced at the nerd's face. The green-haired boy's cheeks flushed red in excitement, his freckles hidden under the blush. Let's check it out. Katsuki rolled his eyes. Typical. Who was he to say no, though? Yeah, whatever. They walked closer without either of them saying another word, watching the guy in the middle dance to the beat. Katsuki got bored immediately. The guy wasn't even good. Shitty Deku apparently thought otherwise. Kacchan, he said, overflowing with excitement. Did you see that? He's amazing. I could never do something like that. Katsuki scoffed, hackles rising. Did he say amazing? Was it this easy to impress this idiot? Given the opportunity, he would absolutely demolish this guy in a dance-off. He wouldn't even stand a chance. The blonde tactfully didn't reply, letting the nerd mumble on as he turned to watch him. His emerald eyes sparkled with joy as he watched the show that stupid dancer was putting on, his hands near his lips as if he was prepared to stifle a squeal he was sure to let out eventually. His face was still flushed and Katsuki found himself annoyed at the fact that he couldn't see his freckles clearly. Why was the nerd such a goddamn fanboy over everyone? It's like he was blinded by the glamour of showmanship and couldn't see the actual skill. It pissed Katsuki off so much. The blonde teen was getting ready to turn away from the crowd and leave already, deciding they've had enough of this stupidity, when something stopped him in his tracks. He stared at the nerd's feet, surprised, and he didn't even notice his mouth falling open. Deku was tapping his feet to the beat of the music. You're such a Deku, Katsuki had teased, laughing at the other boy. You're so bad at this. Deku's wide green eyes filled with tears, his shoulders raised and arms stiff at his sides, hands balled up into fists. I can't help it, he had sobbed, tears running down his face like a waterfall. I just can't feel it. You're just not trying strong enough, Katsuki had said, irritated, then proceeded to shove the other boy harshly. Stop trying to copy me if you can't even do it right. I don't want to dance with someone as useless as you. Katsuki remembered this conversation clearly. Because after this, Deku stopped coming over to his house to practice. They were 7 at the time. And yet, here he was, moving his feet in perfect sync with the music, legs twitching a bit as if he was aching to do something with them but forced himself to stay still nonetheless. Katsuki looked at Deku's excited face again. Then at his feet. No. His whole theory of dance for all being Deku was seeming a lot more likely now. And wait, if that was true, would that mean he'd been crushing on his childhood friend this whole time? He stopped to consider that, and he realized that the idea didn't bother him nearly as much as the possibility that Deku had been lying to him. For years. And keeping all this a secret from him. He couldn't confront him though, not until he was sure. Because it was all just speculation right now, and he didn't want Deku to think that he was some but who goes around assuming stuff about people. No, he needed to be sure. But how? He suddenly remembered the jacket he gave to the nerd a few days ago, the one Dance for All was wearing so shamelessly in his video. He thought about how easy it was to recognize something that belonged to him. A plan started to form in his mind, and he felt resolve settle deep in his He was gonna find out what the deal was with Deku, no matter what. Let's go home already, nerd, he spoke up then, tapping the green-haired teen on his shoulder and starting to walk toward the station entrance once again. He was sure Deku would follow him. He always did. When Katsuki got home that day, his mind was set on putting his plan into motion as soon as possible. He stood in the middle of his room and looked around contemplatively, trying to think of an appropriate first gift for the nerd. His eyes settled upon a small box lying innocently on one of his shelves, and his eyes lit up with satisfaction when he figured out exactly what to give Deku the next day. He walked to the shelf and picked up the box, opening it quickly and picking up the object he had in mind. It was a thick black and orange paracord bracelet, the only one sporting his 2 favorite colors. He got this one from his mom a while ago when he first decided to go hiking on his own. And since it usually went well with his casual clothes, he tended to wear it pretty often when not donning his UA uniform. He honestly didn't mind giving this to Deku. He had several others lying in the same box, but he wondered just how he could make the whole gift-giving seem totally normal. Because yeah, while giving presents to your friends was more than socially acceptable, it was not something Katsuki did regularly. It needed to be an extra special occasion for him to even consider the idea. And this situation was nothing if not special. Even though, it wasn't like he'd ever given presents to the nerd. It just wasn't something he did. Sure, the old hag would make him pass gifts to him from her, but that wasn't the same. Katsuki froze, silently eyeing the bracelet in his hands. Now there was an idea. When Izuku stood up from his desk after homeroom, Kacchan was already at his side. He blinked up at his childhood friend curiously, then gave him a warm smile. "Hi, Kacchan," he said, picking up his notebook absent-mindedly. "How did you find yesterday's homework?" "Okay, now that I think about it, that's a stupid question. Knowing you, you had no problems at all finishing everything. You're the top student in our class, after all. I wonder, is there anything you're bad at? It must be something abstract, something that... Holy nerd, do you ever shut up?" Kacchan cut him off, and Izuku chuckled nervously, biting his lip. "You talk way too much?" "Sorry, Kacchan." The blonde rolled his eyes at him, then shoved something to his ear in an abrupt motion. "My mom has been nagging me for ages to give this to you," he said, letting the object fall and making Izuku catch it clumsily, almost dropping it on the floor. "Make sure you wear it, don't wanna upset the old hag." Izuku just kept staring down at his own hands. At the bracelet he was holding. He knew this bracelet. He'd seen it on Kacchan several times, mostly when they went hiking together. Maybe it was a different one, but with a similar color scheme. Yeah, that was probably it. He held the bracelet to his ear, squeezing it tightly. Even if it wasn't directly from Kacchan, he still felt warm and fuzzy all over knowing it was something he received from his crush. He'd cherish it forever. Izuku had never been happier in his life. His cheeks were tinted pink as he glanced up at Kacchan, trying to convey what he was feeling without actually saying everything out loud. It was just too much. "Thank you," he said, but he still felt like it wasn't enough. He just hoped Kacchan would understand how much this meant to him. He never, ever planned on confessing his feelings, but some weird part of him that liked torturing himself hoped that Kacchan would catch on eventually. The blonde didn't answer. Something new and unusual flashed behind his BLD red eyes, but it was gone in an instant, making it unrecognizable. Izuku searched the other teen's face for a few seconds before Kacchan pointedly turned away, walking out the classroom and leaving a dumbly smiling Izuku behind. He just got a gift from Kacchan. He was so happy he felt like he could fly. He opened the clasps on the bracelet and wrapped it around his left wrist, then clicked it closed. He admired it on himself for a few seconds, silently wishing it was actually Kacchan who got him the gift, and not Auntie Mitsuki. Well, one can dream. Katsuki was seething. It didn't work. Dance for All was not wearing the jacket or the bracelet in his latest video. Was he wrong? Was it not Deku? But then again, if it was actually him, the DMN nerd would be smart enough to remove the stuff he received from Katsuki after the jacket incident. Katsuki narrowed his eyes as he stared at Deku, feeling the pencil in his hand cracking with the pressure. Nerd. He probably just needed to up his game. Because the more stuff Deku was wearing from Katsuki, the more likely it was that he forgot to take something off. The more likely he was going to slip up and reveal himself. He had no ulterior motives at all. And if the nerd wearing his stuff lit up something primal in his gut, that was mere coincidence, nothing else. The next day when Kacchan approached him, he was holding a warm-looking, red knitted scarf. A scarf that looked exactly like the one the blonde usually wore when it got too cold outside. Which was weird, because it was early spring and it wasn't even that cold anymore. "Here," he said in a gruff voice, shoving the scarf harshly to Izuku's. "I saw you shivering outside yesterday. Learn to take care of yourself, idiot." And well, Izuku thought that made perfect sense. Because he was shivering the day before. As he said, it wasn't that cold, but it was March, and the leftover chill from winter still lingered in the air in the early mornings. Izuku came to school wearing the red scarf the next morning, and he would be lying if he said he didn't feel infinitely warmer than previously. Whether it was from the scarf or from the fact that Kacchan paid this much attention to him and actually cared, was a different story. That day Kacchan walked to his desk again after homeroom, and Izuku had no idea what to expect this time. The blonde looked positively furious, and Izuku anxiously stood up to face his friend. His fingers instinctively tightened around the bracelet he received 2 days before, thoughts scattering in his brain in a panicked mess. Did he finally figure it out? Was he mad? Disgusted? Was he going to take his gifts back? Sirpi, he was probably going to punch him too. He'd never speak to him again. God, he was doomed. When Kacchan angrily shoved a big, plastic-wrapped package in his arms, Izuku was so shocked he stumbled back a step, which resulted in him falling back on his desk chair. Now sitting down, he blinked at the package, then at Kacchan's face. He wasn't sure what was happening. The blonde looked absolutely furious, lips set in a scowl and face flushed red. This is your F graduation gift from kindergarten. So you can't say I never gave you one. And then stalked away. Izuku stared after him dumbly. What? He whispered, then looked back at his package and gingerly started opening it. He pulled out a large All Might-themed hoodie from the packaging and his eyes went. It was brand new. Limited edition. What? He repeated, voice higher this time. He couldn't believe his eyes. Was he dreaming? He must be dreaming. Oh my God, It was Ochako, his best friend since they started high school. She was standing a few feet away from his desk, brown eyes wide as she stared at the hoodie in his hand. Is that what I think it is? Yeah, he said slowly, lifting up the clothing so Ochako could have a proper look too. It's a graduation gift. From kindergarten. The brown-haired girl narrowed her eyes at that slightly, lips set in a tight line before she spoke. I'm not sure that's a thing. Oh, that's totally a thing, all right. Kirishima spoke up, with Kaminari at his side. I got some pretty cool toys back then. I bet he's just trying to make up for not giving you a graduation gift. It makes sense. Ochako eyed him doubtfully. It sounds like you're making this stuff up. I've never heard of anything like this. Izuku wanted to agree. But then again, he didn't quite remember much from his kindergarten days apart from being with Kacchan. Everything else was a blur. Because nothing else was important compared to him. He's not making it up. Kaminari joined in, wearing a wide grin. I got kindergarten graduation gifts too. Although getting a hoodie is so much cooler. I was a stupid brat, only ever wanted crappy toys. Izuku looked at the All Might hoodie, contemplating the idea. Maybe Kacchan was just trying to make up for the past. Because yeah, he did apologize, but that never really erased what happened back then. It never brought back the years lost between them, or fixed the scars they both wore on their hearts. He ran his fingers across the soft material, thinking about the past few days. Kacchan had been such a good friend to him lately. He paid attention to him. He was thoughtful. He walked him home every day after school now, and always spent time with him during breaks. His heart squeezed painfully, wanting to express his feelings somehow. He pulled the hoodie tight to his tea, ignoring the still ongoing conversation around him. His vision got blurry, and he faintly felt some wetness on his cheeks. He knew what he felt was long past beyond the lines of a simple crush. He loved Kacchan so much. He knew it was always going to end up like this. Because it had always been Kacchan. There was no one else. He rubbed his eyes with the soft hoodie, trying to get a hold of himself. He needed to get to his next class already. He glanced up to see a few of his classmates, including now Todoroki and Tsuyu next to Ochako, Kirishima and Kaminari, standing near his desk, all looking at him worriedly. Izuku forced a smile on his face and beamed at them like always, trying to dissipate the weird atmosphere that settled around them. Let's go, he said, standing up and still holding onto the hoodie tightly. The break is almost over. We shouldn't be late. He was wearing the hoodie for the rest of the day, and even though Aizawa scolded him for it, he refused to take it off. And for some reason, Kacchan avoided him all day until it was time to go back home. He still walked with him, but didn't say a word, and Izuku felt too self-conscious to break the silence. kept thinking about Kacchan. And how amazing he'd been for the last few days. He was so nice, and Izuku was so glad that they were friends again. He missed him so much. When Kacchan stopped next to him and just gaped at him silently, face flushed red, Izuku realized that he said all that out loud. He covered his face in mortification, feeling his face heat up. That was so embarrassing. He didn't mean to outright say that. He was glad he didn't manage to mumble out something even more embarrassing though. Like the fact that he was completely head over heels with his childhood friend. "I'm not nice," Kacchan said, seething. "What the F? You are?" Izuku shot back, apparently willing to die. "You've been so considerate. And generous. You've always been amazing, but you're blinding right now." Oh God. What was he even saying? He should just shut up and never open his mouth again. Izuku didn't see how Kacchan reacted to that, his face still hidden behind his arms defensively. His heart was beating so fast he thought it was going to catapult out of his eye any second. Whatever, he heard Kacchan say, and when he peeked out from behind his arms, he only saw the other teen's back turned to him. Izuku thought the blonde's voice sounded a bit off, but he couldn't really put a finger on why. "I really think you're amazing," Izuku said then, a lot quieter than before, lowering his arms. "And there is nothing wrong with being nice. It makes you strong." Kacchan didn't reply, just started walking once again towards their destination. When he didn't hear Izuku following him, he turned back to face him, his trademark scowl adorning his face. "You coming or what?" Katsuki was standing in his bathroom, hands clenched around the sides of his sink, his eyes fixated on the water drops falling from his face as they hit the porcelain with steady plops. He glanced up at his reflection in the mirror, his hair dripping and his eyes confused, wild. He had no idea when this started. He didn't even notice it at first. He hadn't been noticing a lot of things recently and it really pissed him off. Deku's round, freckled face came to mind suddenly, cheeks flushed a pretty pink as he was trying, and failing, to hide his features from Katsuki. As if he didn't know the idiot was blushing. He was so goddamn pretty like that. It used to piss him off before, how quickly the nerd lost his nerves around him, but ever since he'd been spending all this extra time with him and just looked, it somehow became endearing. Cute even. Katsuki scoffed, furrowing his eyebrows and opened the tap, splashing another round of ice-cold water in his face. He was so. Since the day Kacchan had first approached him and gave him a bracelet, Izuku had been receiving gifts from him almost every other day. 2 weeks had passed since, and it really didn't look like the blonde was going to stop anytime soon. But it wasn't like Izuku was complaining. On the contrary, he relished the situation like a hungry man presented with his favorite meal, unable to get enough. At first, Izuku had no reason to doubt Kacchan's reasons behind the presents. It all seemed totally believable to him. He never did get gifts on special occasions from Kacchan before, so it was more than reasonable to think he simply decided to make up for it now that they had worked through their elementary and middle school issues. His friends were not as convinced though. "You and Bakugo seem very close these days," Tsuyu said one day, her hand lifted to her chin as she tilted her head contemplatively. "I've never seen him so attentive towards anyone before." Izuku looked up from his bowl of ramen, blinking at his friend in confusion. He heard Ochako chuckle next to him, but he ignored it for now. "What do you mean?" he asked, furrowing his eyebrows. "He acts like this towards everyone he considers a friend." And as far as Izuku was concerned, the blonde really didn't act any differently towards him than he did towards Kirishima or Kaminari, for example. He paid attention to them, gave them gifts. Izuku still remembered the expensive camera Kacchan bought for Kirishima in their first year after the redhead broke his during a class trip. The two models weren't even close to being in the same price category, yet the blonde teen had insisted on giving it to Kirishima. Because he cared. He paid attention to his friends. And yes, him and Kacchan were finally friends. It didn't matter that Izuku had been in love with him for ages, he wouldn't let his stupid feelings ruin things between them. But this, what his friends were insinuating, made something in his tea start to flutter with hope. He squashed it down immediately. "Tsuyu is right," Todoroki spoke up then, surprising Izuku. The boy had been so quiet since they sat down for lunch he almost forgot he was there. "He spends most of his time with you these days. And when he's with you, It's like everyone else disappears. Ochako didn't stop chewing, but Izuku heard her hum in agreement. You're wrong. He chuckled nervously, putting down his chopsticks so he could fiddle with his fingers instead. You've all got it wrong. We're just childhood friends. Of course he's going to be more comfortable around me than anyone else. Todoroki raised an eyebrow at that, but didn't reply, just watched Izuku curiously. It was Ochako who broke the silence that fell on them, apparently having swallowed the bite she'd been chewing on. He's been showering you with gifts, Izuku, she said, very slowly, as if she was speaking to a child. You could fill a whole wardrobe with all the clothes and accessories he's given you in the past few weeks. Izuku felt a blush blooming on his cheeks. He had reasons. Really? And what were those reasons? Ochako asked, rolling her eyes. He gave you 3 different graduation gifts, all of which were limited edition All Might merch. He spent a fortune just on those. When Izuku tried to cut in, telling her that yes, kindergarten, elementary school and middle school graduation gifts were totally reasonable, she rattled on, ignoring him. And let's not even mention all the designer clothes he got for you, she said, waving at the jacket that was resting next to Izuku on the bench. I don't even want to look up a price tag for that thing. Izuku felt his face burst into flames, and his hand involuntarily went to grab at the jacket, his fingers sinking into the material. His parents are fashion designers, Izuku said, voice a bit louder than usual. He quickly glanced around and breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that Kacchan was still safely turned away from their table, arguing with Kirishima over something probably trivial. He looked back at Ochako, voice quieter when he spoke. He just gives the best in everything. The brown-haired girl's face softened at that, and she had a gentle look in her eyes as she put a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Don't you think that there's something more going on here? She asked, searching Izuku's face. Izuku lowered his gaze. As much as he wanted that to be true, it would be stupid of him to think Kacchan would ever think of him like that. To think Kacchan was what? Showering him with gifts. To get his attention. Like some old-fashioned courting practice. It sounded idiotic just thinking about it. Kacchan would never. Definitely not, he said eventually, his lips curling up in a sad smile. He's probably just trying to prove something to himself. You know how he is? He will stop soon, trust me on this. Ochako's face scrunched up at that, but she didn't try and argue with him again. She sighed and turned to Tsuyu instead. Are you free this weekend? I was thinking. Izuku tuned out their conversation and picked up his chopsticks again, resuming his meal. He pushed aside some noodles as he stared into his bowl in silence, eyes following the bubbles of fat swirling in it. Her really shouldn't get his hopes up. He shouldn't even be thinking about this. The less he entertained the idea, the less pain he was going to be in when Kacchan eventually found someone he actually wanted to be with. Because yes, the blonde found his dancing attractive and had a crush on his YouTuber persona, but that was only because he didn't realize he was watching Izuku. And you can't really build a relationship on physical attraction alone, now can you? Izuku let out a small sigh as his eyes drifted to Kacchan once again. He would stay his friend for the rest of his life, and he would die before he ruined this for them. He couldn't go through not being this close to the blonde again. He needed him in his life, by his side. Izuku was sitting at his desk in front of his laptop, checking the stats on his latest video with a small frown on his face. He had no idea what he was doing wrong. There were even less views than usual, even though he was so sure his choreography was pretty good for something so spontaneous. There were only 10 comments, and half of them were complaining over the quality of the video. He slumped down in his chair, letting out a disappointed sigh. He didn't have the money for a better camera right now. He suddenly remembered something Kacchan told him a while ago. I bet if he took the time to actually learn how to edit his videos he'd be a hit. He obviously has talent and he put a lot of effort into getting this good. All he's missing is a brain to make good use of what he has. Izuku's eyes snapped open. That was it. He just needed to learn how to edit his own videos. But where should he start? He decided to do a simple Google search, but the vast amount of information got him confused. There were so many options for high-end editing programs, and they all worked so differently. Which one should he start researching first? He stopped to consider this, eyeing a list of best video editing softwares in 2xxx on his laptop, then ultimately decided to take a different route. He knew someone who could help him out with this, after all. If nothing else, he could ask for some tips on how to get started. He pulled out his phone from his pocket, quickly starting to type up a text. Shinryu hi. Greater than over equal to less than over equal to, / are you free this weekend? He put his phone down, glancing back at his laptop. Maybe he could try and do some homework while he was waiting for a reply. He barely finished opening his notebooks when he heard his phone chirp with a notification. Shinryu hi. Greater than over equal to less than over equal to, / are you free this weekend? Yeah, what's up? Wanna meet up at Plus Ultra Cafe on Saturday? I need some help with my channel. Sure. What time? How about 2 p.m.? Sounds good to me. See you on Saturday then. Yeah. Omega. Izuku put his phone away once the meeting was set up, a happy smile on his lips as he picked up a pen and started on his homework once again. He was glad he had friends he could count on outside high school. And it was such a relief that he didn't have to hide the fact that he had a YouTube channel from them. It always felt like a huge weight on his shoulders whenever he was around his classmates at UA. Not even Ochako knew about this. He did want to tell them, eventually. Just not yet. Maybe after he became famous. Maybe. Katsuki fought back the urge to punch stupid half and half in the face, opting to just glare daggers at him menacingly. The bee didn't seem fazed though as he stood in front of the door to the Bakugo residence, his arms crossed at his easy. What the F are you doing here? Katsuki asked him incredulously. Who the F just shows up at someone's place uninvited? You should ask Izuku out on a date. Before he could even finish his sentence, Katsuki already moved to slam the door in the idiot's face, but the other teen quickly pushed it back, holding it open. What I do and don't do is none of your business, icy hot, Katsuki gritted out, struggling to close the door. Now get out of my face. What the F was his problem? Where did he even get his stupid ideas from? I think you have a chance, Todoroki insisted, and Katsuki was so surprised by what left the BSTRD's mouth that he stepped back, letting the other teen fling the door completely open. What the F are you even talking about? Katsuki said, and he did not screech, thank you very much. He glanced out on the street behind half and half. You know what, get the F in? He grabbed the idiot by his shirt and pulled him inside, dragging him all the way to his room and yelling to the old hag that they were going to be upstairs on the way. Icy hot, the beat let himself be pulled by his shirt, looking as unimpressed as ever. When Katsuki let him go and shut the door to his bedroom behind him, the idiot only patted himself down as if it was a mere inconvenience and looked around Katsuki's room curiously. Nice choice of decoration, he said, and Katsuki felt his blood boiling. He would not lash out on him though. He needed answers first. What the F ever, he spat, plopping down on his bed and eyeing the other teen critically, ruby eyes watching as the bee sat in his desk chair. Where did you get this F-up idea from? Why the hell should I ask the nerd out? And what the F did you mean by saying I have a chance? Todoroki lifted his eyebrows at that. I got the idea from you, Icy Hot said, and Katsuki blinked in confusion. From him. It's clear that you like him. Why else would you be paying so much attention to him? Everyone noticed. Katsuki paled at that. F, had he been that obvious? Double F. What if the nerd also caught on? SHT, he can't let that happen. Not like this. He had no idea whether Deku would even consider him like that. He wasn't going to do anything about his shitty feelings until what? Until the nerd confessed first. Yeah, fat chance. Well, all that doesn't F matter, Katsuki said finally, glaring up at Icy Hot. Because no matter what you think, I do not have a chance. I heard him mumble, I shouldn't get my hopes up today when Ochako questioned him about your gifts, the bee said then, face deadpan. You should ask him out. Katsuki felt his hackles rising. I should not. You probably heard wrong. Half and Half let out a loud sigh and stood up from Katsuki's desk. He tilted his head a bit as he watched the blonde with a disappointed look on his face. I just want both of you to be happy. But if you can't see how he looks at you then, he shook his head and started walking out Katsuki's room. No need to see me out, I remember where the entrance is. And with that the BSTRD was gone. Katsuki was frozen in his spot on the bed. Who the F did the idiot think he was? He stayed there for a bit longer, mind reeling with all the thoughts icy hot stirred up. He entertained the idea of Deku possibly reciprocating his feelings. He thought about the nerd blushing so often whenever they were alone, whenever he gave him a gift, whenever he said something close to nice, and suddenly the whole thing didn't seem too far-fetched. And yes, Deku had always been one to blush and get embarrassed easily, but never to this extent. Katsuki felt the anger leaving his body, bit by bit, his breathing calming down as he kept thinking about this. Maybe half and half really was onto something. Well, there really was only one way to find out. He'll have to swallow his insecurities, ones he would never admit to having, and ask Deku out. He could do that. He couldn't do this. The more he thought about it, the more absurd the idea started to seem in his head. He would make a fool out of himself. He would lose Deku. Maybe this crush would go away, eventually. He just had to wait it out. He stopped in his tracks at that, staring at the display of one of the clothing shops he was passing by. That. He was not a coward. He will ask Deku out on Monday. As soon as he gets time with him alone, he will do it. He kept walking down the street, trying to get his mind off of things. His Saturday had already been a mess, what with Icy Hot showing up at his door early in the morning and then his mom bothering him about doing chores around the house. He hightailed out of the house as soon as possible, deciding to grab something to eat from his favorite restaurant on the other side of the city. His eyes caught on something green as he was walking, and he immediately turned fully towards it, heart beating like crazy in anticipation. And to his surprise, it really was Deku. His heart skipped a beat, legs already moving to close the gap between them, to run up to him, and Katsuki froze. Deku wasn't alone. The green-haired teen was walking next to another guy, and the person's arm was wrapped around his shoulder. The blonde felt something wild and untamable flare up in his issy, and he started walking closer to them, watching. Who the foo, was the nerd blushing? He felt rage boil in his stomach at the sight, and he suddenly really wanted to rip that guy's arms off. Starting with the one that was still on Deku's shoulders. He got as close as he could without being spotted, trying to hear what they were talking about. Yeah, he was aware of the implications of what he was doing, but they were in public. If they didn't want someone to overhear their conversation, they should have stayed at home. Another wave of something washed through him at that thought, at imagining Deku and this random guy in the greenette's room. Alone. I'm so glad you could spare some time for me, Deku said, and Katsuki narrowed his eyes, focusing on every word. I've been very anxious about this. I really need your help. What the does the nerd need help with? And why didn't he just ask Katsuki? Weren't they friends? No problem, Izuku, the guy replied, and Katsuki swore he'd heard that voice before. He couldn't see the guy's face properly from this angle, but it wasn't like he cared much anyways. Wait, Izuku. Your skills have always been amazing, Deku continued, and Katsuki clenched his fists. Even your YouTube channel is growing so fast. People absolutely love your dancing. Katsuki stopped walking then, mouth agape as he watched the pair walk into a coffee shop up ahead, still chattering amicably. YouTube channel. What? It took him a few moments to follow after them, trying to see Deku and his friend through the enormous glass windows. When he spotted them, it felt like a huge bucket of ice-cold water was dumped on him. He watched in shock as Deku hugged the guy, Shinryu, and when they separated, the ugly talentless said something, then leaned in to embrace him. He didn't see Deku's face as he was facing away from the window, but at this point he didn't even want to. He turned around in a flash and in a fit of anger kicked over a trash can that dared stand a bit too close to him, and he fought back a scream. This. Deku. His shitty boyfriend. Everything. He was out. The early afternoon sun warmed up Izuku's shoulders as he walked, and a happy, content smile slowly made its way to his face. He hadn't felt this content in a while. Apart from the fact that Kacchan didn't reciprocate his feelings, and he was so sure of this, no one could convince him otherwise, everything was turning out great. Because he was closer than ever to Kacchan. They were inseparable just like when they were kids, and it filled Izuku with so much happiness. And on top of all this, Shinryu actually agreed to help him out with his videos. He just hoped he could actually put what he learned to use once he sat down to edit his own stuff. Suddenly a strong arm wrapped around Izuku's shoulders, and the boy looked at the perpetrator with a startled look on his face. When he saw brown locks, sharp eyes and a cocky smile, he relaxed. "Hey, Izuku," Shindu said in a cheery tone, leading them towards the cafe where they planned to meet. "How is my favorite teammate doing?" Izuku chuckled at that. "Lie it. I know Todoroki is your favorite. She is your girlfriend, after all." "Busted," Shindu said with a grin. "I still like you though, little guy. I wouldn't have come out to meet you on a Saturday of all times if I didn't." Izuku's face flushed bright red in embarrassment. He knew Shindu was busy, being an adult and all. He was only a few years older than him, and yet, he already co-owned a studio with his girlfriend and had a dance team on top of doing part-time work. He must be swamped. Izuku should have known this was an inconvenience for him. "I'm so glad you could spare some time for me," he said finally, trying to sound as apologetic as possible. "I've been very anxious about this. I really need your help." Shindu squeezed his shoulder a bit in reassurance. "No problem, Izuku. Your skills have always been amazing," Izuku continued, because he really felt like he should make sure his friend understood how much he appreciated what he was doing. And well, some harmless, genuine praise never hurt anyone. Even your YouTube channel is growing so fast. People absolutely love your dancing. "You can stop sucking up to me, short stack," Shindu laughed, and Izuku pouted at the nickname. He wasn't that much shorter than him. "I already said I'd help you out, didn't I?" They reached the cafe, and Shindu let go of his shoulders, holding the door open so Izuku could shuffle through. The green-haired teen picked a random table somewhere near a wall and dropped down into one of the chairs, smiling anxiously up at Shindu who followed after him. "You really don't need to feel bad about asking for help, Izuku," Shindu continued, moving to take off his jacket. "We are friends. You know I'll always try and make time for you." Izuku was up before Shindu could sit down, wrapping his arms around the man's torso in a quick, tight hug. "Thank you," he said, feeling emotional. His voice felt a bit wobbly, but he would not cry. Not again. When he let go, Shindu rolled his eyes at him, then stared at his face for a few seconds in silence. "What's up?" Izuku asked, self-conscious. He had no idea why Shindu was watching him so intensely. Did he do something wrong? Oh, seriously, he should have asked if he could hug him. But then again, hugging was a pretty normal occurrence between them, and Shindu knew he was a hugger. He'd never had problems with it before. Shindu's eyes narrowed slightly and he moved closer, lifting his hand to Izuku's face. "You have an eyelash on your cheek," he said, and Izuku blinked. He stood still as his friend leaned a bit closer and tapped a finger to his cheek, picking up the stray eyelash. When he got it, he lifted it up for Izuku to see. "Want to make a wish?" he asked with a grin, and Izuku's mind immediately went to Kacchan. What he wouldn't do to have Kacchan love him back. "Sure," he said, trying to feign nonchalance as he blew the eyelash from Shindu's fingertip. He quickly sat back down in his chair, picking up the dessert menu from the table. He felt like having something extra sweet today. "So what's up with your boyfriend?" Shindu asked then, also sitting down and picking up his own menu. Izuku slapped his down, looking at him bewildered. "My what? You know, Bakugo?" Shindu continued, raising an eyebrow. "Or is he your guitar? Same difference to me, really." Izuku felt blood rush to his ears, and he could only stutter in response, eyes bulging out comically. You're mistaken. He's not my boyfriend," he trailed off as he finished, cheeks tinted pink. The last word was barely above a whisper. Shindu gave him a knowing smirk. "But you sure want him to be, huh? Shindu?" Izuku yelped, not sure if he should be mortified or happy that his friend knows him this well. "You're not denying it, though," the young man said, leaning forward on his elbows to get a better look at Izuku's face. "You're always babbling about how amazing Kacchan is, and you've been showing off your gifts to everyone on the team for the past few weeks. I just assumed you guys were a thing already." Izuku lowered his gaze and let out a soft sigh. Before he could answer though, a waitress appeared at their table, asking if they were ready to order. Once she left, Izuku looked back at Shindu, noticing his friend was watching him expectantly, still waiting for an answer. He couldn't help sounding wistful as he spoke. "Just because I want something doesn't mean it will ever happen. He poked at a scratch on the wooden table, needing to do something with his hands. Kacchan really is amazing. He's so smart and strong, and he's the best dancer I've ever known. I've always looked up to him more than anyone else, and all I've ever wanted was to be able to stand by his side. You know, we weren't on good terms for a while in elementary and middle school, but we made up and I'm so happy that I got my childhood friend back. I'd never do anything to jeopardize what we have. But now, Izuku looked up at Shindu, trying to decide whether he should continue, whether it was okay to bare his soul to his friend like this. When the young man simply nodded at him with a curious look on his face, Izuku felt it safe to continue. Now everything feels so messed up. Complicated. Because I have been hiding this part of my life from my friends, from Kacchan, and now that he's so close to finding out about it, I am terrified. Did you know that he actually has a crush on my YouTuber persona? He chuckled sadly at that, covering his face with his hands. He found one of my videos, well, Mina found it, and he said my dancing is great. He said I'm talented. But he doesn't actually know it's me. And I know, deep down, that if he found out he would be disappointed. Because he never thought someone like me could ever learn how to dance. I don't think he can ever see me as someone other than useless little Deku. Have you tried talking to him about this? Shindu asked gently, concern evident on his face. Maybe if he understood how strongly you feel about it, he would give you a chance. And then you could show him how much you've improved. I've had so many opportunities in the past to bring it up, but I just can't. He pressed the heel of his right hand to his eye, rubbing it. I'm so scared he'd tell me to stop. I'm scared he'd laugh at me. I don't think I could take that from him, not again. There was a beat of silence. I'm a coward, Izuku said then quietly. I'm so pathetic, I can't even be myself around the people I care about the most. When he glanced at Shindu, his friend looked like he wanted to either punch him or give him a hug. If Izuku was honest, he'd prefer the hug. You're so goddamn stupid, the young man said eventually, his brown eyes narrowing at Izuku. Just man the hell up and talk to the guy. I know he can be strong to deal with sometimes, but you said it yourself, you're friends now, right? Right? So he should listen to you. And if he doesn't understand, then F him. He doesn't deserve your affections. If he doesn't treat you at least like a friend, with respect, then you should stop wasting your energy and emotions on him. Izuku was silent for a bit, chewing on his lower lip anxiously. I know what you're trying to say, but Kacchan, he's different, he said eventually, avoiding Shindu's gaze. I could never stop wanting to be his friend. He's always been there. I can't imagine my life without him. Shindu looked furious at that response, but Izuku couldn't help it. It was the truth. The young man huffed, but didn't push the subject. Izuku was sure he'd bring up the issue again at another time. The green-haired teen allowed himself a soft smile. Shindu was a good friend. The waitress came back with their order, putting 2 cups of coffee in front of them. A plate with a slice of carrot cake was placed in front of Izuku next to his coffee, and he salivated at the sight. It had been so long since he had some. So what exactly do you need help with? Shindu asked with a sigh, leaning back in his chair a bit and already sipping his coffee. You said something about your channel. What's up? Izuku was glad for the topic change. He let out a barely noticeable sigh of relief and fished out his phone from his pocket, already pulling up the YouTube app to show his latest video to his friend. Shindu put his coffee down and took the phone, raising an eyebrow. Did you actually record this in complete darkness? He asked, then scrolled down to see the few comments that he received since he uploaded the video. No wonder you barely got any views. And even less likes. Izuku rubbed at the back of his neck sheepishly, feeling a bit embarrassed at his lack of skill. Yeah, well, I'm not the best at this, he said, then took his phone when Shindu reached forward to hand it back. I've never really paid attention to how my videos look. I always put all my energy into making the dance itself be as good as it can be. But apparently that's not enough anymore. And the main reason why I made this channel years ago is because I wanted feedback. I don't even get that anymore since all people seem to be commenting on is the quality of my videos. So what, you need me to edit them for you? Shindu asked, tilting his head to the side a bit. Or do you need to borrow my recording equipment? I don't mind you using it, but to be honest, you'd be better off getting your own in the long run. Oh. Izuku's eyes widened a bit, looking surprised. I didn't even think to ask you about using your equipment. See, you're so much better at this than I am. Shindu rolled his eyes, and Izuku continued. Actually, I wanted to ask you to teach me how to edit, the greenette said with a smile, grabbing his fork and pulling the plate with the carrot cake on it closer to himself. Your videos always look so cool. You're super popular. Alright, sure, I can do that. Do you have a video recorded already? When Izuku shook his head, Shindu lifted a hand to his chin. Okay, well I have time today, so if you want we can shoot a video at the studio. Once that's done we can just edit it at my place. I'll do it for you this time and show you the basics. Izuku nodded excitedly, just shy of jumping up and down in his seat. Yeah, let's do that. He took the first bite of the cake, and he hummed happily as it melted on his tongue. The sweet taste helped him elevate his mood even more, erasing any bad feelings that still lingered after the conversation he just had with his friend. It didn't matter if his love life was miserable, because he had great friends and well, everything was going to work out eventually. He was going to get popular on YouTube, he'd make a name for himself, he'd open his own studio, and then he would be on the way to becoming the best professional dancer there ever was. He would dance behind the most popular artists in their clips, and billions would be watching as he moves. It was just a matter of time. He was going to become the best. Katsuki was looking at the screen of his phone with narrowed eyes, his lips twisted in an ugly scowl. Dance 4 All just uploaded a video. He wasn't sure why he didn't unsubscribe yet. He was so pissed. Even just the thought of that Shindu fu, Katsuki's mind supplied helpfully, made him want to punch something until his knuckles bled. He'd hated that guy ever since they met a few years back when Katsuki started going to competitions with his team. Weasel Face was so annoying, and such a goddamn poser. Katsuki despised him with every inch of his being. And for some reason, all respect he'd ever held for the guy, and right now the blonde would deny ever having had any respect for him, disappeared in an instant as soon as he realized he was Deku's boyfriend. He gritted his teeth in annoyance, angry at the world, angry at himself. It's not like Deku was his or anything. They were friends, nothing else. And it looked like there was no chance of them ever becoming more than that. His heart felt like his heart crumpled in on itself, and Katsuki took a sharp breath, squeezing his eyes closed. If he should have known. He should have known. He was smarter than this. His crush on stupid Deku simply blinded him to the truth. In retrospect, it all made perfect sense. The blushing, the happiness in the nerd's face when Katsuki complimented the dancer, the way he was always looking forward to Katsuki's analysis on the guy's choreography, He'd successfully managed to not think about this CRP over most of the weekend, busying himself with homework and preparing for his test the next week, but as soon as his phone pinged with a notification and he saw the thumbnail of the new video, his carefully crafted walls came tumbling down, letting his thoughts fueled by fury and jealousy swirl around in his mind, making him want to break something. He barely held himself back from smashing his phone to the wall. The only thing preventing him from doing it was the knowledge that the old hag would have his but if he destroyed yet another one. He squeezed his phone tighter, hands trembling and his fingers turning white from the pressure. The words Deku said the day before rang clearly in Katsuki's mind. I need your help. Your skills have always been amazing. Your YouTube channel. Your dancing. He shuddered when he remembered how Weasel Face called Deku by his first name, making it sound so intimate. There really was only one conclusion he could come to when he rationalized everything. Dance for All was Shindy, who was Deku's boyfriend. And Katsuki had been making him uncomfortable by giving him gifts for the past few weeks. That's why the blushing and nervousness. He was probably mortified and couldn't tell Katsuki he didn't want his presence. He pushed the nerd too far, apparently, because Deku decided to ask his boyfriend for help. I've been so anxious about this. Katsuki gritted his teeth and pressed play. He would watch this stupid video and pick it apart, making sure he found every single misstep, every wrong move, every missed beat. At that moment, this was the only thing he could do to make himself feel less shitty. He needed to know that at least his dancing was better than that efforts. Even if apparently he was not even close to being what the nerd wanted from a romantic partner. Otherwise he would have done something. But they were never as close as Katsuki previously believed. He didn't know anything about Deku anymore. But maybe that was for the best. Maybe he could kill his feelings if he realized he had zero chance with the idiot. Because yeah, he had no chance in hell. He couldn't wait to rub this in Icy Hot's face. The small satisfaction, however sour it was, lessened the pain a bit, but only temporarily. Because as soon as he laid eyes on that effer in the video, his eyes widened impossibly, all the BLD running out of his face. He was wearing Katsuki's bracelet. The one he gave to Deku. The one the nerd had been wearing almost every day since. Katsuki was shaking violently, trying not to scream. It really meant nothing to him after all. Was this the help Deku needed? He needed to let Katsuki know that he didn't care at all. That his gifts meant so little he could just give them away to some extra without a second thought. He suddenly felt nauseous, and he threw his phone away, and all logical thinking with it as he grabbed his gym bag and rushed out of his home, wanting to drown himself in a good workout so he wouldn't have to think about this anymore. He was sure it would all come back to him again the next day at school, but well, that was something for future Katsuki to worry about. It was Monday morning, and despite the fact that it was Monday morning, Izuku woke up unusually early, vibrating with a joyful energy he just couldn't contain. He felt so amazing in his skin, he felt so powerful, like he could accomplish anything he put his mind to. With a skip in his step, he entered the classroom of 2A, a huge grin stretching on his face. He was in a lot earlier than usual, and everyone looked at him a bit weird, but right now he didn't care. You could probably guess what the reason was for his exceptionally happy mood. When he checked the stats on his video this morning, he was blown away by the absolutely positive reception to it. There were hundreds of comments just in a day, all telling him how amazing his skills are, how talented he is, and a few of his regular viewers said they were happy to see he decided to edit his videos. His day couldn't be better. Now he just needed to talk to Kacchan. After his conversation with Shindu, Izuku finally decided over the weekend that he would come clean about everything. He would tell Kacchan everything, starting from when he took his first dancing lesson. He just hoped the blonde would listen to him until the end. When his hopeful emerald eyes met Kacchan's crimson ones though, it felt like a bucket of ice-cold water was dumped on him. His whole body froze mid-step, eyes going wide when he took in his childhood friend's expression. The blonde looked pissed, angry, which was not unusual for him, but his eyes, they held genuine hatred. He looked absolutely disgusted and furious. With what? With Izuku. He was looking at him, wasn't he? A chill ran down his spine when Kacchan looked away, as if he couldn't even bear looking at him for too long. His good mood went down the toilet just like that, leaving behind an empty shell of nervousness and anxiety once again. He forced himself to move again, walking to his desk with stiff legs. He faked a smile, hoping the others wouldn't notice the sudden change in his behavior. "Good morning, Kacchan," he greeted the blonde, but his childhood friend didn't even bother to grunt in response like usual. Izuku wasn't really expecting anything else after how Kacchan looked at him, but he hoped he was wrong. The blonde really was mad at him. But for what? What did he do? Realization dawned on him as he sat down, his face turning pale with fear. He found out, didn't he? Izuku dug his fingernails in his thighs as if trying to physically hold himself together. This was okay. They can talk it out. He still didn't know the extent of Kacchan's anger. Maybe if he apologized and explained everything properly, the blonde would calm down and forgive him. Yeah, Izuku could fix this. He took a deep breath, trying to center himself. He got this. He would talk to Kacchan after homeroom. Kacchan was avoiding him. He'd been purposefully avoiding every single interaction Izuku initiated since the morning, and the few times when he was physically unable to get away from the freckled teen, he simply ignored him, like he couldn't hear him. Like he wasn't there. Izuku honestly wished Kacchan got angry at him instead, yelled at him for lying, punched him, anything but this. Because Izuku had no idea how to deal with silence. It was so unusual for him. And those eyes, the last time Kacchan looked at him with so much hatred in his gaze was, well, it was in middle school. Izuku wanted to cry. He wanted to grab Kacchan by his stupid shirt and shake him until he stopped acting so weird. He wanted to punch him and kick him, just to get the other teen to talk to him already. Izuku's terrible mood followed him around like a dark cloud the whole day, making his classmates wary of approaching him. Ultimately, it was Ochako who tried talking to him during lunch break, a worried look distorting her normally angelic features. "Is everything okay between you and Bakugo?" she asked hesitantly, furrowing her eyebrows. "You both are acting a bit off." She winced at the way she ended up phrasing it, and Izuku felt his face scrunch up as he tried to hold back his tears. He failed. "No, nothing is okay," he sniffled, lips wobbling. "Kacchan hates me, I don't know what to do." "I'm sure he doesn't hate you," Ochako said kindly, pulling Izuku in for a hug. "You guys just need to talk. Lord knows you have a ton of things to figure out." Izuku pushed himself away from his friend, a confused look adorning his face as he lifted an arm up to wipe away his tears with the sleeve of his uniform. "What do you mean?" he asked, momentarily forgetting about his problems. "What? Did she figure it out too? Is that why she was saying this?" But if she knew how Izuku had been lying about this for so long, then why was she on his side and not Kacchan's? "Don't worry about it," Ochako smiled at him gently, then slapped a hand on his shoulder as her grin widened. "Go talk to him. I'm sure everything is gonna work out in the end." Izuku sighed dejectedly but nodded, inwardly grumbling about how that was what he'd been telling himself for years now, and it always looked like his life was making turns for the worse instead of the better. He was standing in front of the Bakugo residence, his hands fiddling with the hem of the hoodie he got from Kacchan the previous week, shifting his weight from one foot to the other anxiously. He was trying to gather up enough courage to finally ring that goddamn bell. He trembled as he reached for the button, his fears weighing down on his heart heavily. What if Kacchan never forgave him? What if he lost him over this? Shindu's words resonated in his mind, and he steeled himself as he pressed down on the button, listening to the bell ring out loudly behind the closed door. They were friends. If Kacchan didn't understand then maybe Izuku should stop trying to force his presence on the other team. He could find a new crush. Probably. Definitely not. Izuku heard loud shouting and grumbling coming from inside, and one of the voices definitely belonged to Auntie. The other one was Kacchan. Izuku would recognize his voice anywhere. The door snapped open in a flash, and Izuku was so shocked by the force of it he had to take a step back to be able to keep his balance. When Kacchan's ruby eyes zeroed in on him, the permanent scowl on the blonde's face got even deeper and his eyes burned with unconcealed hatred. Izuku glanced at his feet instead. He couldn't keep eye contact with Kacchan, not when he was looking at him like that. He gripped his hoodie tight in his palms and opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Dread coiled around his throat like a snake, and he couldn't for the life of him make any comprehensible sounds. "What the F do you want?" Kacchan asked, sounding like he was seconds away from slamming the door shut in Izuku's face. Well, he probably was. Hi, Kacchan. Wow, what an amazing start, Izuku. Congratulations. Way to make an even bigger fool of yourself than usual. Can we talk?" "There is nothing to talk about," Kacchan said, sounding painfully controlled, and Izuku's gaze snapped up at that, surprised to see the way his childhood friend was forcing a blank look on his features. It did not work. The fury behind those BLD red eyes shone through like a forest fire in mid-July. "I got your message loud and clear." Izuku furrowed his eyebrows at that. "My message? Yeah. Now leave me the F alone." Kacchan moved to slam the door closed, but Izuku stopped him, pushing it back desperately. Kacchan was visibly annoyed at the bold move, but the green-haired teen was on a mission. He needed to find out what this was about. "If you're talking about the YouTube channel," Izuku started, determined to straighten things out with the blonde, "then you need to know. I already know your F secret, Deku." Kacchan snarled at him, and Izuku was taken aback by the sheer venom in his voice. "Do whatever the F you want in your free time, I don't care. But next time stop letting others waste their time on you when you obviously do not give a F about them." Izuku blinked. And again. What was Kacchan even talking about? He replayed what the blonde said in his head once more, trying to make sense of the words. He said he knew Izuku's secret. Okay, so that was one less thing to worry about. He said he could do whatever he wanted in his free time, so the blonde didn't care that he hid his dance lessons from him. This was good so far, but the rest just didn't make sense. Stop letting others waste their time on you when you obviously do not give a F about them. What did this mean? Oh no, did Kacchan think he didn't care about him because he didn't tell him about the lessons? But of course. He was so goddamn stupid, of course Kacchan would be this hurt over it. He had been hiding this for years, and he didn't even find this out from Izuku himself but from his stupid videos. He took a deep, shaky breath and lowered his head a bit. I'm really sorry, Kacchan, Izuku said quietly, regret dripping from his voice. I should have told you ages ago. I'm so sorry I kept it from you. I really wanted to tell you but I was scared. Scared of what? The blonde snarled at him, stepping out from inside the house to the curb, making Izuku stumble back a bit. He shut the door forcefully behind him, eyes narrowing even more. I'm not the bully I used to be but I thought you knew better than that. I thought? He cut himself off, shaking his head. Just leave me the alone. I told you I don't care what you do. I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. Izuku's eyes widened in shock. The situation suddenly took a turn he was not expecting at all, and that slippery snake of dread slid up along his spine this time, making him freeze. Don't look for me, Kacchan said in a steely voice, not leaving any room for objections. Don't talk to me. I don't want to be your friend, so just leave me the hell alone. When Izuku didn't move, Kacchan let out a resigned sigh and ran his hand through his blonde spikes irritatedly. Tell your boyfriend I said hi. I can't wait to beat his butt in the upcoming competition. And then he was gone. Izuku was still staring at the closed door in front of him, frozen in shock, when his brain decided to reboot itself. Kacchan was such an absolute idiot. Izuku was fuming. The blonde had no right to assume things about him and cut him off like this when he obviously had no idea what was going on. The green-haired teen raised his hand to press that stupid button again to ring the bell and get the blonde to listen to him, so he can explain everything, but he stopped himself before he actually pressed down. He remembered Shindu's advice, and his tea filled with righteous fury. Shindu was right. He should not waste his energy on someone who didn't even want to hear him out properly. Someone who clearly told him they want nothing to do with him. Izuku clenched his raised hand into a fist and hit the wall next to the door, just barely missing the button he was planning to press just seconds ago. He didn't need Kacchan. The blonde obviously didn't see him as anything else other than a friend, and he didn't even bother to try and stay that. He took a step back, eyes never leaving the long closed door. He wouldn't be the one to try and fix things this time. If Kacchan didn't want to be his friend anymore then that was fine with Izuku. And maybe the agonizing pain in his CHST would lessen over time. He just needed to focus on becoming the best dancer that ever lived. He can do that. No more distractions. Just training. The rest of the week went by in a flash, what with Katsuki trying to focus on practicing for the upcoming competition and not on shitty Deku and his apparent lack of care about losing Katsuki as a friend. Did he ever care really? He remembered wide emerald eyes that had sparkled with awe as the young, freckled boy had watched him, following his every move with his gaze, always trailing after him with that hopeful, love-struck look on his face, like Katsuki was the best thing that ever happened to him. But that memory was far in the past, buried under years and years of miscommunication, bullying, and well, whatever this thing was that they brought upon themselves this time. It looked like him and Deku would never be able to gain common ground, no matter how strong they tried. And maybe that was for the best. Dwelling on these things just caused unnecessary headaches for the blonde, and he definitely didn't need any distractions right now. Not now, he resolved. Not ever. He couldn't help though noticing the freckled teen wherever he went, his eyes seeking out those untamed green curls against his will, his teeth squeezing painfully whenever he spotted him. For the most part the nerd acted like nothing was amiss, and Katsuki really didn't know how to deal with that. There was no acknowledgement whatsoever from the green-haired boy after their confrontation on Sunday, no sad looks or hunched shoulders, no regret on his face, no anger or resentment, nothing. Deku was ignoring him, once again, just like he did when all this started, even though Katsuki had no idea what this was, but it felt way more real this time, it felt somehow final. And he absolutely hated it with every inch of his being. It felt unnatural, strange, and so out of place. Like they got off track, like they were in a timeline where things got messed up when they shouldn't have, and he went on with his days with this awful, dark feeling settled deep in his gut, unable to find a way to fix things. So he just watched Deku from afar, while pretending not to pay attention, and his mood soured with every passing hour the nerd continued to not care. Friday was the worst out of all the days. Katsuki had been already on edge the second his alarm woke him up, the knowledge that the competition he'd been practicing for with his team was only a day away fanning the flames of excitement and anxiety both within him. March so far had been an absolute train wreck, not even considering the fact that they had their final exams coming up, and he hoped that with the start of April, and with the start of the new school year, their final year, things would finally get back on track. Balancing his time at dance practice with his team and the time he spent studying for the exams had never caused him problems before, but add Deku and this fight they had into the mix and Katsuki immediately turned into a nervous, exhausted wreck. His friends noticed, of course, but no one apart from Kirishima actually tried to give him advice. Even Todoroki avoided him, which was strange, since the stupid half-and-half usually didn't pick up on any social cues, let alone the fact that Katsuki was agitated and ready to explode any second. It was probably the huge bags under his eyes that gave him away. And his murderous gaze. But even though he felt like CRP, he still got up way too early at F o'clock in the morning, just like always, try and get himself into the right mindset for the rest of the school day, telling himself over and over again that he just needed to get through this last day before the weekend, then he could finally wind down a bit and recenter himself during the dance competition. He was nervous, of course, but he would never admit that to anyone. He was always nervous when it came to proving himself, even though he never let it show, his confidence and his need to win overshadowing every other feeling he might experience. He knew he was the best dancer on their team. Hell, he was probably the best dancer in F Tokyo, PRD. His mind wandered to dance for all, remembering the way the guy danced in his videos, the fluidity of his movements and the way he moved with ease, letting the music take over his body, then the smug face of Shinryu flashed before his eyes as he leaned in to embrace Deku. Rage surged up inside Katsuki so suddenly he had to grip his thermos tighter just to keep a yell in, hissing quietly instead, but he did not stop, deciding instead to down whatever was left of his coffee as he made his way towards the gates of UA. He did not admire that F. He was absolute garbage. He may be a half-decent dancer, but it was probably only thanks to whoever was coming up with the choreography for each of his videos. Because Katsuki was not stupid, he had seen Weaselface dance before, they had faced each other in competitions before, and he knew the FO was not that good. He was more or less calm by the time the rest of Class 2A arrived, all chatting quietly among themselves and, well, avoiding Katsuki as much as they could within the four walls of their classroom. And then Deku arrived, just a minute before Aizawa did. Katsuki had to do a double take, and he wasn't the only one. Every pair of eyes in the classroom were glued to the nerd, faces frozen between shock and bewildered amusement, and no one said a word. The class grew immediately quiet, and Deku had the nerve to look confused, as if he didn't know exactly why his classmates were all staring at him. "I know I'm late," he said quickly in between pants, and Katsuki belatedly realized that the idiot must have been running. His face was red and flushed, his heaving from exertion. "I'm really sorry. But there's no need to look at me like that. This isn't the first time. I mean, sure. I should have gotten my act together already, but I really can't help it, and last night was..." "Deku," Katsuki cut him off angrily, voice low and dangerous. If he had to listen to the nerd's ramblings any longer, he was going to kill someone. And he really didn't want to hear what the idiot was up to the previous night for him to come to school like this. A traitorous voice in his head whispered, he was probably with his boyfriend. All night, and his scowl grew even deeper, anger tinting his vision a bloody red. He barely registered the serious, pissed-off look Deku was giving him in response. "What the F are you wearing?" he gritted out, forcing his body to stay still in his chair. He wanted to jump up and shake some sense into Deku. What was he thinking? Deku furrowed his eyebrows and straightened his posture, squaring his shoulders. He looked ready to take Katsuki head-on if he needed to, and the steel in his eyes sent shivers down the blonde's spine. "What am I?" he started, just as confused as before, but still pissed. Then he glanced down and his eyes widened in surprise, his cheeks getting impossibly redder than before, and he tried to pull down his hoodie to cover himself with it as much as he could. He fumbled with it for a few seconds before glancing back up, looking panicked as his gaze jumped from one classmate to the other, an incomprehensible jumble of words leaving his lips at a terribly fast pace. When his eyes found Katsuki again though, anger quickly and visibly replaced any trace of his previous embarrassment. Katsuki could only stare as Deku let go of the hem of his hoodie and glared at him, proceeding to strut, and Katsuki was not imagining things, it was AF strut, towards his desk and flopping down on it with a blank face. The first one to speak up was Ida, of course. He stood immediately in front of Deku's desk with a strong, disapproving look. "This is most inappropriate, Midoriya," he said, gesturing with his stiff hands wildly. "You are a student at a prestigious high school, you cannot afford to attend classes in such an attire." Katsuki narrowed his eyes when Deku turned his face towards Four Eyes, looking sheepish. "I apologize, Ida," he said earnestly. "It won't happen again. I was just running so late I didn't realize I haven't changed since last night." Four Eyes lifted a hand to slide his glasses up his nose a bit, then nodded. "I understand. Although I don't appreciate you arriving so late to school every day either, Midoriya. It is not becoming of a good student such as yourself to act like a delinquent." Deku blushed. "If blushed. Yes, I know. Sorry." The murmuring just barely started up again in the classroom after this weird chain of events when Aizawa entered. He stopped in his tracks when his eyes fell on Deku, and Katsuki decided to continue to glare holes into the nerd's back. He deserved getting chewed out by every single person that decided to do so, after showing up to school like this. "Problem child," Aizawa sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Why aren't you wearing your uniform?" Deku hunched forward in his seat, trying to appear smaller, probably. "I slept in and I was in a hurry to get to school in time," he said after a few seconds. "I didn't realize I forgot to change into my uniform before I left home." Aizawa looked like he was absolutely done with this day already, yet it barely even started. "Make sure this doesn't happen again," he said then, sounding pained. "You won't get a punishment this time, but next time I won't be so understanding." The nerd nodded and Katsuki rolled his eyes at his behavior. What AF idiot. Who doesn't realize they didn't change after they woke up? Katsuki was 100% sure Deku was doing this on purpose. No, he still didn't acknowledge Katsuki, but the way he was acting, it all seemed way too deliberate to be accidental. Katsuki gritted his teeth and tore his gaze away from the sight in front of him. He was definitely doing it on purpose. Deku was leaning on Uraraka's desk on the other side of the classroom, in perfect view from where Katsuki was sitting. He was chatting with round face amicably, ignoring everyone else in the classroom at that moment, and the blonde felt like he was going to go on a rampage any second now if this kept up. He didn't know when his eyes wandered back to Deku's backside again, but as the nerd shifted, bending down a bit to put more weight on his arms he was using to lean on the desk, Katsuki lost his last functioning brain cell. His gaze was transfixed on the delicious curve of the nerd's butt, the slight flex of his thigh muscles, and the way those F-cursed yoga pants hugged his admittedly amazing form. He looked like he walked out of a F-Pawn movie. Or one of Katsuki's wet dreams. He wasn't really sure which, but it's not like he could form any coherent thoughts at the moment, anyways. He had no idea Deku looked this good under his baggy clothes. Sure, he would sometimes dream about what the nerd looked like naked, but never in his wildest dreams had he expected him to be this fit. His already conflicted feelings toward Deku got even more jumbled up at this development, anger and betrayal mixing with a searing hot, liquid arousal that threatened to burn him alive from the inside out. He felt disgusted with himself when he realized what was happening. If he did not need this right now. Wanting to embrace the nerd because he had feelings for him was one thing, but having this violent attraction surge up inside him so suddenly was a whole different matter entirely. He could deal with feelings. He could bury them, beat them down, and he could, eventually, destroy them. Physical attraction, however, was a lot harder to work through. Especially because the effects appeared so suddenly and so totally out of his control, he didn't know what to do. It didn't happen often, so he never really got the chance to learn how to control his reactions. So, Midoriya? Huh. Katsuki quickly turned away from Deku and picked up a notebook that was lying on his desk, pretending that he wasn't just staring at his childhood friends but, Sirbi. This is exactly what he was talking about. What about him? Katsuki gritted out, his voice sounding strained even to his own ears. He didn't have to look up at Kirishima to know the idiot had that knowing look on his face he always sported whenever the nerd came up in conversation. He's actually pretty hot, isn't he? Katsuki couldn't help the fury that engulfed him as he snapped his gaze up at shitty hair, glaring daggers at him. What the F? We were all thinking it, dude, said Dunce Face, who was standing next to Kirishima and Zero. Soy Face nodded. I wouldn't have guessed he was hiding such a great body. I bet all the girls in class are talking about him now. Katsuki's left eye twitched, and he suspiciously looked around their noisy classroom, hoping to see, exactly. Proof that the girls of 2A were not, in fact, salivating after Deku's butt, like he was doing just seconds before. When he noticed Hagakure and Jiru talking in hushed voices, stealing glances at Deku and F giggling, irritation prickled his skin, running down from his neck all the way to the tips of his fingers. And it wasn't just them. The blonde saw almost every single girl in the classroom acting the same way. Deku, to Katsuki's ever-building anger, seemed frustratingly oblivious to all this happening around him. Or maybe he was simply pretending not to notice, which was not entirely outside the realm of possibility after all the things he'd been hiding and lying about. Just the thought itself almost sent the blonde into a fiery spiral of rage and violence, but still he held himself back. What Deku did was none of his business. He did not care. He kept repeating this to himself, trying to find some semblance of calmness yet again. He did not care. Pretending not to care had never been something Izuku excelled at. He always thought of himself as an open book, easily readable, his reactions giving away almost every single thing that went through his head. Kacchan, though, seemed to be the only person in Izuku's life who was never quite able to see through him. More than a decade of misunderstandings and miscommunication, and Izuku thanked whatever higher powers might be there for the small break he received that week. His terrible attempts at feigning ignorance and pretending that the blonde didn't exist were way too transparent, and the looks he got from his friends at times did nothing to alleviate the sinking feeling in his stomach. Ochako seemed especially observant, and when Izuku went over to her desk for a chat in between classes, she said nothing for a few seconds, just watched him with a raised eyebrow, amusement evident on her face. So, she started clearing her throat. What's up with the aggressive hate flirting? Izuku sputtered in response, trying his best to look offended at the insinuation. What? Ochako rewarded his effort with a flat look and vaguely gestured to Izuku's lower half. The yoga pants? His face flushed a bit, but thankfully he was able to fight it down with a scoff. He crossed his arms defensively, glaring at his friend. I didn't do it on purpose, he said, rolling his eyes. I'm still mad at him. I wouldn't do something like this just to get a rise out of him. Ochako helpfully supplied, a small mischievous smile playing on her lips. Honestly, I think it's not a bad idea. It's only been a few hours and he's already looking like he's gonna blow a fuse. She glanced behind Izuku and let out a chuckle. The only thing that could make this better is if you gave him a show. Let him know what it is he's missing out on. Izuku turned that idea around in his head a bit before the residual anger from Sunday took over once again, overriding his inhibitions, and he slowly, very slowly bent down, leaning onto Ochako's desk while making sure that he never broke eye contact with her. When he finished, the brown-haired girl quickly slapped her hands over her mouth to keep in the laughter that bubbled up in her teeth, and Izuku also allowed himself a grin. You're the best, she wheezed, trying to get her breathing under control. When she calmed down, she very quickly chanced a look behind Izuku again. Mission accomplished. He looks absolutely furious. And turned on. Izuku's face flushed a bright red and he shifted a bit as the reality of the situation dawned on him. God, he felt so out of his element. What was he doing? This so wasn't him. But then again, he still remembered Sunday. Their fight. Kacchan's idiotic assumptions and his accusations. Where on earth did he get the idea that Izuku had a boyfriend? In what dimension was that a logical assumption? Who would he even date? There was no one he spent as much time with as he did with Kacchan, no one that he cared for so deeply, no one that occupied his thoughts and dreams like the blonde. He simply shined way too brightly in Izuku's mind to let anyone else receive even a quarter of the spotlight. Izuku sighed. He was angry and heartbroken, and truly just sour over this whole situation. Shindu's words kept ringing in his mind, telling him he deserves better. He deserves someone that actually takes the time to talk things through before shutting the door in his face. No such attempts were made on Kacchan's side so far. Plenty of doors were shut in his face though, including the one last weekend, the one that was the final nail in the coffin for Izuku. At least that's what he kept telling himself. But he knew deep down that if the blonde ever tried apologizing, he would likely forgive him on the spot. Then he was a lost cause. Hopeless. I can't help but agree with you on that, Ochako said, and that's when Izuku realized that he'd been mumbling. This time he had no energy to feel embarrassed. He was, simply put, drained. Yeah. Mina cornered Izuku during their lunch break, pulling him aside before he could enter the cafeteria. She had a determined, excited look on her face and she started talking as soon as she grabbed his arm. I know what you're hiding, she said, and Izuku squeaked, not quite sure how to react. Don't make a scene and just follow me, okay? I'll buy you lunch afterwards. Izuku eventually relented and let himself be dragged into an empty classroom. Mina shut the door behind them and then leaned on it, a calculating glint in her eyes. She just watched him quietly for a while and it slowly started to make Izuku feel nervous under her gaze. He shifted his weight from one leg to the other, scratching the back of his neck. So, she started, still looking intently at Izuku. Tell me your plan. My plan. He dropped his hand to his side, tilting his head a bit in confusion. What plan? Well, obviously, your great plan of wooing Bakugo. She rolled her eyes. I see where you were going with the get-up, she waved at his yoga pants, but you'll obviously need a lot more than that to get him to break. So, what's your plan? I'm sorry. Izuku was as confused as ever. Get him to break. What do you... Oh dear God, Izuku, please tell me you weren't just hoping for things to turn out okay without you doing anything. But she sounded exasperated. You know you can't rely on Bakugo to SCK up his pride and apologize without proper incentive. You know how he is. Izuku took a cautious step back. How much? Oh, I know everything, Mina said with a grin that looked way too malicious for someone as sweet-looking as her. And when I say everything, I mean everything. I know all your dirty little secrets, Izuku. She put an index finger to her lips coyly. Or should I call you Dance for All? The silence was deafening. Izuku found himself unable to speak, just staring at Mina in front of him who still held the same mischievous pose as before. Then she lowered her hand and rolled her eyes. Are you going to say something or are you just going to keep gaping at me like a fish? Izuku forced his mouth closed at that and blinked a few times, trying to get a hold of the situation once again. What are you talking about? He asked finally, searching the pink-haired girl's face for any hint of a bluff. Mina let out an exasperated sigh, shoulders slumping in defeat. Come on, Izuku. I said I know everything. She waved her arms around in a swiping motion. There's no use in trying to deny it. It's honestly pretty obvious if you just pay attention. Izuku narrowed his eyes and leaned back against a desk, crossing his arms in front of his He thought he'd been pretty good at hiding his YouTuber persona. He definitely wasn't obvious. How long have you known? He asked tentatively, still eyeing the pink-haired girl warily. Even though she did mention something about wanting to help him, Izuku wasn't sure this all wasn't just an elaborate prank. For a few weeks, I think, she answered, clearly trying to recall when she realized it. It was kind of suspicious how eager you've been to hear our opinions on Dance for All. And well, once I've seen you wearing Katsuki's jacket, Izuku blushed at the mention of that. That was his first mistake. It just felt so good to dance while being surrounded by Kacchan's smell. He couldn't take it off. And well, that's when Kacchan also got suspicious. Anyways, I started paying more attention to your videos after that, she continued with a cheeky smile. And let me tell you, connecting the dots was easier than I thought. Same build, same height, exact same terrible fashion sense. Why is everyone criticizing my clothes? Izuku pouted. There's nothing wrong with what I usually wear. Mina let out a quiet snort at that. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with what you usually wear. Which is your school uniform. When Izuku glared at her, the pink-haired girl's grin only grew wider. You know what, I take it back. Your uniform is terrible too. You still don't know how to properly wear a tie. Izuku huffed, earning a chuckle from Mina. So, she started, let's get back on topic. What's your plan? It took Izuku a few seconds to remember what she was referring to. And then he promptly blushed. I don't have a plan, he squeaked. I do not want to woo Kacchan. Mina rolled her eyes once again. Sure you don't? I really don't, he insisted. I want nothing to do with him anymore. She raised an eyebrow at that. Your actions today at Ochako's desk tell a different story though. Okay. Izuku threw up his hands. So what if I wanted to get back at him for being a JRK? I'm heartbroken. I really thought we had something and then he just had to ruin it. I was going to tell him about everything and then I found out he already knows and he hates me. Izuku trailed off when he noticed a knowing smirk on Mina's face. What if I told you that he doesn't actually know CRP, she asked, pushing herself away from the door she'd been leaning on. What if I told you that he's just an idiot who is assuming things without first confirming anything? Izuku leaned forward as if to hear her better. I'm listening. First, I have a question. She pressed her lips into a tight line. Why on earth does he think that you have a boyfriend? Izuku sighed. I wish I knew. He told me that I can't say hi to my boyfriend, but I have zero idea where he got the idea from. He lifted his right hand to his chin, deep in thought. He was acting normally on Friday and then when I went to talk to him on Sunday he was just so pissed. The only thing that happened on Saturday was, Izuku gasped, covering his mouth with his hands. Oh no, I presume you realized something? Mina asked with a chuckle. I went to meet with Shindu on Saturday. He started, eyes wild. He's my team captain, you know. And he has a YouTube channel. I asked him to help me edit my videos because I remember Kacchan saying I would get more views if the videos would be better and so we met in a cafe. As Izuku trailed off, Mina cocked her head to the side. So you think he saw the two of you together? Izuku nodded, still in shock. Alright. Well though, she huffed. I think we can work with this information. What do you mean? As I've said, Katsuki doesn't actually know CRP, she said, her eyes glinting playfully. He still doesn't know that you're dance for all. And we can use that against him. What? Izuku blinked at Mina in confusion. But he said he figured out my secret. He obviously meant your boyfriend, dummy, Mina said, rolling her eyes for the third time that afternoon. He thinks Shindu is your boyfriend and that he is dance for all. Which, as I've said, means that he knows nothing at all. Izuku's eyes widened impossibly as he recalled everything Kacchan said to him on Sunday. It all played differently in this light, and the implications made his head swim. You still here? Mina was standing just a few steps away from him, waving a perfectly manicured hand in front of his face. He blinked, then nodded. All right then. She stepped back, her usual grin already playing on her lips. Since we've already established that you obviously don't have a plan, we'll have to come up with one together. And guess what? I already have an idea. Okay, Izuku nodded, but first, what are you trying to accomplish? What do you mean? Mina blinked at him owlishly. You love him, don't you? Yes, the green-haired boy gritted out, face flushed an impossible shade of red. But why are you helping me? Because I'm your friend, dummy, she smiled at him warmly. And that's what friends do. Katsuki was fuming. He did not have to listen to this CRP. Apparently, Kirishima had a different idea though. Just listen to me, he repeated for the 100th time that evening. You're being an absolute tool. I thought you were better than this. This is none of your business, shitty hair, Katsuki spat out, glaring at the redhead who was blocking the door to the classroom. Now let me leave. Kirishima steeled himself, glaring back at his best friend. Not until you listen, he said, just barely keeping himself from yelling. You're both miserable. Just apologize already and make up. Katsuki narrowed his eyes. No. And it wasn't like he didn't want to make up with Deku. Hell, that was all he'd been thinking about all week. But his pride refused to let his heart take the lead this time, just like so many other times before. Stop being so stubborn, Kirishima said, exasperated. If you just talk things out, I'm sure it would all work out. Katsuki turned away from his friend and took a deep breath, closing his eyes. He guessed there was no running away this time. He already told almost everything to the redhead. It wouldn't hurt much to tell him the rest of the story. He has a boyfriend. There was nothing but silence from the direction of the door, and Katsuki waited. Then what? A beat of silence. Katsuki glanced back at his friend, only to see his face contorted with confusion. He does not. Katsuki grimaced, his hands clenched tight at his sides. He does, he said. I saw them together at a cafe. They have kissed. He spat out the last sentence angrily, feeling his nails bite into his palms. Kirishima looked even more disbelieving at that. Are you stalking Izuku now? He asked, half joking. If you're not? Okay. Katsuki heard Kirishima let out a deep sigh. Let's say I believe you. So what if he has a boyfriend? That's no reason for you to act like a JRK. You're friends. This shouldn't come between you, no matter what feelings you might have. I can't. Kirishima looked at him questioningly. I can't be his friend, Katsuki clarified, frowning. I just can't be around him when all I want is, so you'd rather lose him completely? Katsuki stopped, thinking it through. What was worse? Never seeing Deku again. Or watching him be happy with someone else. He'd rather tear his heart out than have Deku so close to him yet so far. But then again, he thought about his bright smile, his nervous tics, how red his face got when he got embarrassed, his stupid mumbling, those adorable freckles. Katsuki hid his face in his palms, face twisted up in pain. Yup. At least shitty hair sounded empathetic. The thing about hosting dance competitions outside in the spring was that it was bound to attract a bigger audience, which was always a plus. Events like the annual Tokyo Street Dance competition cost quite a lot to organize, so the extra money was always welcome. The downside was, well, you could never quite depend on the weather. On Saturday, though, the day the event was supposed to be held, the weather proved to be more than good. The sun was shining bright with no dark clouds anywhere in sight, and Izuku breathed a sigh of relief as he and his crew made their way through the check-ins and towards their designated tent. He just hoped it held up throughout the day. Izuku had been shaking with excitement since the moment he woke up that morning, more than ready, but a little bit nervous, of course, to participate in his first ever official dance competition. He went through his mental checklist as they settled into their tent, making sure he remembered to pack everything he needed, and then went through the contents of his backpack just in case. It wouldn't do to be left without his water bottle or his favorite towel. He was relieved to find that nothing was missing, but he blinked in confusion when his fingers brushed against something papery. He pulled out a neatly folded piece of paper, opened it, and started reading. Izuku dear, he already felt himself tearing up. I just wanted to let you know that I am so proud of you. I know I wasn't always supportive like you needed me to, but know this. I will always believe in you and be there when you need me. I'll be watching you from the audience. Do your best. I love you. Mom. He was bawling his eyes out by the time he finished, the tears making his eyesight blurry. Good. His mom was the best. He loved her so much. He folded the piece of paper again and carefully placed it in his backpack, trying to wipe the tears from his face. A warm hand settled on his shoulder. Everything all right? Izuku managed to wipe away the remains of his tears with the sleeve of his hoodie, then flashed a bright smile toward Shindu. Yeah, he answered, but his voice sounded wet. He cleared his throat. I'm fine. Just got emotional is all. Mom wrote me something. Shindu grinned back as well, removing his hand from Izuku's shoulder. Mothers. They always know exactly what to say. Izuku nodded, then glanced at the rest of their crew. They all looked relaxed and unconcerned, except for Dami, who was stretching religiously with a very determined look on her face. You look tense, Shindu said, bringing Izuku's attention back to him. We're not on for several hours, you can relax. Or check out the other divisions if you want. You're free to roam around as long as you're back before we're called out. Izuku furrowed his eyebrows, thinking. Wait, he said slowly. Aren't you and Tadame competing as a duo too? Aren't you gonna be too tired to perform? Why haven't I thought about this before? He started to get even more anxious, eyes snapping back to the stretching Tadame once again. Calm down, Izuku, Shindu chuckled, ruffling Izuku's locks playfully. This is not our first rodeo. We're on in 30 minutes and then we have more than 2 hours to relax and get ready for the dance with you guys. Alright, okay. Izuku took a deep breath, trying to get rid of his anxiety. We're gonna do great? Of course we are. We have you after all. Izuku lifted his arms in front of his face, trying to hide his blush. I'm not that good. Anyways, I'll be checking out the rest of the competition. Bye. Shindu's bright laughter followed him out as he left the tent, his face still burning hot from embarrassment. Mina had the most obnoxious smile on her face ever since they met up at the entrance to the park where they were holding the dance competition, and it was pissing Katsuki off more and more with every second that passed. It wouldn't have bothered him normally, but that day it seemed like it was directed towards him, which just wouldn't do. After about the millionth time Katsuki caught her looking at him with that awful look, he snapped. What the F do you want, raccoon eyes? She just giggled in response, brushing past him to get inside their tent. She giggled. What the hell? Who said I wanted anything, she asked, fluttering her eyelashes with faux innocence. I'm just glad we're here is all. I have a feeling this weekend is gonna be great. Katsuki snorted. Just usual Mina stuff then, nothing to worry about. She was always obnoxious, anyways. The blonde proceeded to ignore the loud chatter once again that usually surrounded their crew and sat down on one of the provided benches with his breakfast. He didn't notice anything was amiss until the tent got quiet. He glanced up from his half-eaten sandwich with a questioning look, only to notice that everything was the same, except his teammates all talked between themselves quietly, relaxing. Katsuki furrowed his eyebrows. That could only mean one thing. Mina was gone. He stood up and left their tent with sandwich in hand, eyes scanning the gathering crowd just past the cordons that divided them from the audience and the rest of the park. But where did she go? Mina, what are you doing here? Izuku all but shrieked as he saw the pink-haired girl peek inside their tent with a grin and a wave, and he quickly dashed to her side and pulled her away from Shindu's questioning looks. Just wanted to check in, she replied with a cheeky grin, letting herself be dragged away from peering eyes. How are you holding up, bunny boy? When they finally reached a place Izuku thought was a safe distance from their tent, he slowed down and let Mina go. The green-haired boy gave her a shy smile, excited, nervous. His eyes widened as he slowly came to realize something. Oh God, if you're here that means that Kacchan is also here. And now I'm even more anxious. What if I mess up and he sees? Wait, is he gonna be watching us? No, I can't go out like that. He can't see me. Why did I come here again? This was a mistake. He was proper panicking by the time he finished, and Mina only sighed. It's gonna be okay, Izuku, she said comfortingly. And anyways, you're all gonna be wearing masks, no. He won't recognize you. Not if he didn't recognize you in your videos either. Oh, Izuku gasped, clapping his hands. You're right. So, she started with a grin, you're free, right? Wanna watch the other performances with me? Izuku grinned back, happy? Yeah. It was time. His heart hammered loudly in his izzy as he let out a shaky breath, hands sweaty from the nerves. They were standing next to the stage, just barely out of view from the first row of the audience. The sun was still burning bright and a light breeze helped Izuku cool his face down. They can do this. And the next performers, the rabbits? Loud screams and clapping came from the audience as a response, and Shindu grinned reassuringly at the crew one last time before he pulled down his mask and started ascending the stairs to the stage with Izuku and the others in tow. They were all wearing the same getup, loose black pants with an even looser hoodie, and a flashy white bunny mask. Their hoods were all up, so it was impossible to tell who was who. They got in position on the stage. Shindu and Izuku were in the front with the other 3 members behind them. Izuku hesitated before scanning the audience in that spare second he had before the music started. He wanted to find his mom in the crowd, but he was also afraid of finding Kacchan. No matter what Mina said, he still couldn't shake the nervousness that flooded him at the thought of Kacchan watching him and analyzing him and seeing him fail. When he did look up though, he noticed his mom straight away. She was in the front row, looking at their crew with a hopeful, excited look on her face. He couldn't let her down. Then the music started. He never saw Kacchan during the performance, and he couldn't decide whether he was sad or happy about that. They were good. If they were more than good, they were amazing. And while Katsuki would never say that out loud to anyone, he could admit it to himself as he watched as Weaselface and his crew moved in unison on the stage. They looked so in sync, like they've been dancing together their whole lives. And those blasted bunny masks, Katsuki couldn't tell who was who, but he was sure they had an extra body since their last competition, although he couldn't for the life of him figure out who was the newbie. He immediately recognized Dance for All though. It wasn't strong. He moved exactly the same way as in his videos, and the added bunny mask just helped Katsuki even more to notice the similarities. He glared at Dance for All Weaselface as he confidently danced at the front, moving to the beat like a true professional. Katsuki huffed. He hated him so much. Though he had to admit, he really was a good dancer. A stray thought made itself known as he watched him move, and irritation built in his the longer he kept dwelling on it. Was he better than Katsuki too? The cheering didn't die down even after they got back to their tent, drenched in sweat and face covered in tears. Izuku was still trembling from happiness as he darted around the tent hugging every other member tightly, not caring about how dirty they were. I can't believe we've won, he muttered happily for the 100th time when he finally sat down on one of the benches, feet tapping the ground fast like he couldn't contain himself. I can't believe it. Well, you better believe it, said Shindu as he grinned like this was the happiest day of his life. I am holding a trophy after all. Izuku looked at the golden-colored object in awe. It's appealing. Yeah, Tatami agreed. It's gonna look great in the studio next to this little thing. She was holding up a tiny trophy, a miniature version of the bigger one Shindu was holding, and the plaque on it said Best on Stage Chemistry, Duo Division. I'm so happy. Izuku jumped up then. I need to find my mom. He looked at Shindu inquisitively, who simply nodded in response. I'll be back in a bit, just need to talk to her before she goes home. He was off in a flash, dashing out of the tent as fast as his tired legs could take him. He absent-mindedly pulled down his bunny mask to cover his face. He really didn't want to meet Kacchan. Not now. Especially now that their team lost, while Izuku's won. The blonde wouldn't be happy, and the green-haired boy really didn't want to deal with the inevitable aftermath. Lady Luck was apparently not on his side though, because not long after he left his tent he came face to face with a very angry blonde, who, as soon as he noticed Izuku, started striding purposefully towards him. Oh no. He didn't recognize him, did he? Oh no. He needed to move. He needed to get away. But his feet seemed frozen in place as he stood there, stock still, watching an infuriated Kacchan get ever closer to him. Kacchan yelled when he was a few meters away from Izuku, his hands shoved deep in the pockets of his ever-saggy pants. Dance for all. Izuku shook when he heard the name, but then he breathed out in relief when he remembered what Mina told him. Kacchan didn't know anything at all. And right now, the blonde had no idea he was talking to Deku. Izuku nodded at him when he finally stopped in front of him, then inclined his head to the side as if to ask what Kacchan wanted. Oh man. The blonde looked pissed as hell. I'm gonna make something clear, Kacchan started angrily. I hate you more than anything. Izuku's eyes widened behind his bunny mask. He hoped this wasn't gonna end in him getting beaten up. But your dancing is? He grew quieter, as if it was strong for him to speak the words. It's decent, he spat out eventually. Izuku kept quiet still, really not wanting to give himself away. He waited for Kacchan to continue, his skin itching from the anxiety and the dried sweat. When the blonde leaned in a bit closer to say something, the strong smell of Kacchan hit Izuku's nose and he breathed in sharply, trying to keep his composure. The words his childhood friend spoke registered only a second later and he blinked a few times in confusion before tilting his head a bit to the side. I challenge you to a dance-off, Kacchan said, determination clear in his voice. You won today, but I'll show you tomorrow that I am definitely better than you. So prepare yourself. When Izuku didn't answer, he continued. Tomorrow, 5 p.m. at the abandoned warehouse near Takadana Station. He glared at the green-haired boy. Be there. With that he turned around quickly, walking away with his hands still inside his pockets. He looked as relaxed as ever, as if he didn't just challenge Izuku to a freaking dance. Izuku's head was reeling. He couldn't believe this. Oh God. He needed to find his mom, quick. And then Mina. Mina had never been so excited for Sunday to come. The previous day she and Izuku had spent almost the entire afternoon discussing different plans, and well, she never would have guessed before, but hanging out with Izuku one-on-one was a proper treat. He had been nice and polite in the beginning when she suggested they hang out at Izuku's place, offering her drinks and snacks and apologizing about 100 times for not cleaning his room before letting Mina in. This was expected. Izuku had always been known to be polite. Truth be told, the room wasn't the tittiest one she'd been to, but it didn't even hold a candle to the mess Kaminari's room was usually. And let's not even mention Izuku's mom. She was such a sweetheart, she always was. Sometimes Mina wished there were more mothers like her in the world. So yeah, they had spent the entire Friday afternoon and evening in Izuku's bedroom, discussing strategies, and Mina was delighted to see her green-haired friend slowly ease up around her. He had even started joking. She had no idea he was such a sassy SHT. She absolutely loved it. That Friday she had learned a lot more about Izuku than in the last 2 years of high school, which was quite a feat to be honest, since the green-haired boy tended to be very open about his feelings and thoughts. Still, by the time Mina had decided to call it a day and go home, they had yet to come up with a proper plan for Izuku to make up with Katsuki and possibly get back at him for being a JRK. But now, after the dance competition and after Katsuki's bold challenge to dance for all, Mina could finally breathe easily as everything seemed to finally click into place. This setup was more than perfect. Initially she planned to throw a party of sorts, no one would question it, they are finishing their second year, after all, and somehow force the idiotic pair to dance together or something, but this was even better. She giggled to herself happily as she picked her phone up, fingers already tapping on the screen to call Izuku. She had to make some arrangements. There was nothing extraordinary about the abandoned warehouse. It had been, well, abandoned for quite a long time, standing empty somewhere in the middle of the tiny warehouse district near Takadana Station. It wasn't quite dark yet when Katsuki arrived, and he quickly made his way to the back entrance where a couple years ago a bunch of high schoolers tore off the planks from the door that barricaded it. He made sure none of the workers who were just leaving the other warehouses saw him, and he slipped inside. There was already quite a crowd, way bigger than he expected. He knew Mina was coming along with their crew. He had told her about the challenge not long after he talked to Dance for All, and she took it upon herself to organize everything. And he also knew she was gonna tell a few of her other friends about it too. The bigger audience, the better, but he did not expect the 30-something high school-aged kids in the dirty, dark warehouse when he entered. A few of them cheered as soon as they saw him, but Katsuki just ignored the extras and went straight for the first person he recognized, who was, not so surprisingly, Mina. She stood out from the crowd with her bright pink hair, and she was talking animatedly to 2 extras who seemed to be setting up the speakers and the lighting for the dance-off. I knew it was a good idea to leave the preparations to you, the blonde said as he approached her. Didn't expect such a huge crowd though. Mina turned towards him with a chuckle. Well, you should have. You're pretty notorious in the community and well, this is the first time you've ever challenged anyone to a dance-off. Katsuki raised an eyebrow, looking unimpressed. Because no one else so far has been even close to my level. Pinky's face brightened up immediately at that, looking very much like a child who was being promised their favorite treat. So you admit that he's as good as you? No. Then he took a breath, trying to calm down the anger prickling at the base of his neck. Maybe. I don't know. That's why I challenged him. I have to be better than him, because if I'm not then maybe Deku? You're trying to prove to yourself that you're more worthy of his love than Shindu, right? Mina's voice came soft and gentle, like a mother's caressing hand. Katsuki didn't answer. His nails bit into his palms as he squeezed them into fists. CRP Katsuki? You need to know that even if he is better than you, it doesn't mean you're any less worthy. The blonde sneered at her, ready to object immediately, but she continued, "What matters is not how well you dance, but how you act. And you have been acting like AFJRK to Izuku." Her soft features turned stony when she said that last part. "Also, I don't want to spoil anything really, but dear, you have a huge surprise coming for you today." Katsuki blinked in confusion. "What are you talking about?" Mina just shrugged and turned away from him, walking back towards the two guys setting up, apparently finished with their conversation. Katsuki was inclined to file this weird comment under the girl's usual antics, but something in her eyes when she said it made him reconsider. The surprise. Was Weaselface an even better dancer than he expected? Was someone going to try and sabotage the dance-off? Katsuki had no idea what he should be thinking, so instead he decided to scan the crowd. A few more people arrived since he entered the warehouse, and everyone was standing around in groups of 3 or 4, chatting. He narrowed his eyes suspiciously when he noticed that none of the Ketsubutsu jerks were there, not even Dance for All. Were they not coming, or were they just simply late? There was only a couple of minutes left until 5 p.m., and the blonde grew increasingly more agitated when there was still no sign of his opponent. This was not how he was going to win this. Just as that thought came and went, a single person entered from the back door of the warehouse. Katsuki recognized him immediately by his signature bunny mask, and he scowled in distaste. As much he was relieved that the guy showed up, he still hated his guts. As Dance for All walked closer though, Katsuki's ire towards the other dancer grew with every step he took. He was wearing Deku's hoodie. The one Bakugo gave him specifically because something primal inside of him wanted to see the nerd in his colors. It was a simple black hoodie with orange accents, nothing too fancy, and to be fair, it could have been one of those mass-produced brand hoodies that everyone tended to wear, but Katsuki knew it wasn't. He would recognize that style anywhere. This was a hoodie from his parents' collection, made at Katsuki's request. There was only a limited number circulating in Japan, and one of them belonged to Deku. Well, apparently the nerd didn't think too much of it if he could just give it away to his boyfriend. This line of thought inevitably led Katsuki to think of all the times the two must have had shared clothes in the past, for it to be so normal for them. By the time Dance for All made his way to Katsuki, the blonde was radiating an insane amount of murderous energy, and the crowd around them quickly took several steps back to give them space. Mina took this chance to loudly clap her hands and step inside the circle, getting everyone's attention. "Welcome, everyone," she yelled, already settling into the role of the host, a wide, excited grin adorning her face. "I hope you're all ready for an exciting dance-off." The crowd cheered, and Katsuki just kept glaring at the effer behind that pretentious mask of his. "Who's the better dancer? You decide who wins tonight," she continued, twirling around slowly so she could flash her happy grin at the people standing around the three of them. "Is it gonna be Bakugo Katsuki, 3-time solo junior champion of the annual Tokyo Street Dance Showdown?" The screaming got louder than before, some people whooping to hype the others up. "Or is it gonna be the mysterious dancer and YouTuber, Dance for All?" The screaming continued and Mina signaled the guys who were setting up before. "You're a monster." When Katsuki heard those familiar lines and the beat started up, he decided to take initiative. He quickly moved to the middle of the circle, feet tapping a few times to feel the beat fully before he started moving. He knew he shouldn't go over the top in the beginning. He needed to see first what he was up against. So he settled for a few simple steps and moves as a warm-up, all the while trying to gauge his opponent's reaction. The guy didn't look fazed at all, but honestly, it was strong to tell with his face all covered. He stood at the edge of the circle in front of Katsuki, arms crossed in front of him as his feet continuously tapped to the beat. Katsuki narrowed his eyes. He needed to see what the guy was gonna bring to the table. It didn't take long for Weaselface to interrupt him, jumping in front of him and starting to dance instantly, movements fluid and effortless. Katsuki blinked and took several steps back, giving him space, and he watched intensely from the edge of the circle, Mina grabbing onto his shoulders for support. "No need to take it easy, Blasty," the pink-haired girl shouted next to her so she could be heard over the loud music. "As you can see, he's a lot better than you might have expected. Just didn't want to get tired before I even started," Katsuki yelled back, anger and the need to win fueling him as he tried to wait a bit longer before jumping back in. He watched dance for all, trying not to feel impressed by the other's moves and how easily he transitioned from one position to the other. He looked agile and DMN strong, especially those legs. He hated himself for that small flicker of attraction that sparked in his gut as he watched, but he couldn't help it. He had always found strength attractive, but not always necessarily in the physical sense. This person though, there was just something about him. Katsuki shook his head quickly as if trying to get rid of his stupid thoughts, then forced himself to remember exactly why he hated this guy. As the familiar fury and resentment replaced that tiny flicker of something, he moved swiftly to interrupt the other's dancing, and Weasel Face oh so politely gave him space, backing off. The crowd kept cheering. Katsuki couldn't tell who they were cheering for more as of yet, but that was okay. They just barely started. He was going to show them that he was the better dancer, no matter what. Izuku had never been more in his element. To be clear, yes, he was a nervous wreck when he arrived at the warehouse, fretting over his, or more like, Mina's, choice of clothing, over how he should be acting and whether he even stood a chance against Kacchan. That was all normal, and he was immensely grateful to be wearing a mask at that moment. He was careful not to move too much. He knew his fidgeting would have given him away. He tried following Mina's instructions, acting as confident as he could to throw Kacchan off until the very last moment. As soon as he started dancing though, all his worries fled his mind in an instant. He felt the music running through him, he felt it thrumming in his BLD, and the faked confidence suddenly became real. He wanted to show Kacchan what he was capable of. He needed him to see. He'd never wanted to win anything more in his life, and he was going to give it all. He just hoped it was going to be enough. As Kacchan interrupted his dancing yet again, Izuku took the chance to prepare himself for what he was going to do. He knew it wasn't the most straightforward way of doing things, and it could possibly trip Kacchan up strong enough to make him lose, but the green-haired boy remembered Mina's words. "It needs to be dramatic," she had said, waving her arm around enthusiastically. "And if Blasty messes up because of it, then it's his own fault, really. He should have figured it out already." Not that Izuku didn't agree that Kacchan deserved some payback after how he was acting, but he didn't want to be the reason Kacchan lost a dance-off. He knew how the blonde would react to losing unfairly. No, Izuku shook his head slightly. He shouldn't doubt Kacchan like that. He knew how amazing he was. There was no way something like this would worsen his performance. If the blonde was better, then he was going to win. The green-haired boy resolved himself once again as he watched Kacchan do another impressive move, and he jumped in just as the next song started playing, facing his childhood friend. He waited for the perfect moment, and then he pulled his hoodie and mask off with one single motion incorporated into his dancing, a move he'd been practicing all morning, and he threw them aside quickly, glancing at Mina as he did so. The girl gave him a happy double thumbs up, and Izuku tried focusing on his dancing. He really did, but he needed to see Kacchan's reaction. So he chanced to look. The blonde looked utterly shell-shocked, mouth agape as he stared at Izuku. He wasn't even blinking, he just looked so surprised, and then Izuku tore his gaze away, trying to get back into the right mindset. Dancing first, then he can deal with Kacchan later. It was Deku all along. In a matter of seconds, billions of thoughts passed through Katsuki's mind, memories, words exchanged replayed in his head as he stared at his childhood friend like it was the first time he had seen him. He couldn't believe it. And yet, he couldn't believe he had been so blind. He was totally oblivious, ignoring every single clue that pointed to Deku being the YouTuber dance for all. Rage, betrayal, regret, pride, and several other feelings he refused to name clashed against each other in his mind, and for what felt like hours he couldn't even move a muscle. Then Deku's gorgeous, determined eyes flickered to meet his, and Katsuki immediately snapped out of his stupor. If there was no time for this now. They were in the middle of something, and Katsuki would die before he lost because he was caught off guard like this. He emptied his head from all the thoughts concerning Deku and this issue they had, and focused on the freckled boy's movements instead. Just as fluid and seamless as before. He was wearing a simple black sleeveless CRP top and yoga pants, and with his midriff exposed the flex of his muscles were clearly on display. It was a terribly mesmerizing sight, but Katsuki knew better than to get distracted again. He would win this dance-off. There was no other option. He jumped back in, eyes never focusing on anything longer than a second as he let the beat lead his movements. He closed his eyes and let himself go. He felt it in his BLD. Like surging fire, like the beating of drums running through him from his fingertips to his toes, he felt the music inside. When the screaming from the crowd around him suddenly reached obnoxious levels, he opened his eyes to gauge the situation. His gaze fell on Deku. He was standing on the edge of the circle, face flushed red with exertion and emerald eyes glistening with something. Tears. He looked up, and the crowd just kept screaming and pushing each other. It didn't take them long to break the circle and jump on Katsuki, stopping him in his tracks. He tore his gaze from the weirdly nostalgic sight that Deku provided. When was the last time the other looked at him like that? With so much admiration. And scowled as he refocused his attention to prying the annoying airs off him that just kept coming, hugging him and patting him on the back. Eventually Mina's voice broke through the screaming, and the music quieted down. And the undisputed winner is Bakugo Katsuki, she screamed, her voice hoarse probably from yelling along with everyone else while they were dancing. Don't forget to congratulate Dance 4 all as well. It was a super close one. It took several minutes for the crowd to calm down and Katsuki was more than irritated. Now that the dance-off was out of the way, he only had one thing on his mind. He needed to talk to Deku. The annoying effer wasn't anywhere to be seen though when Katsuki finally had a chance to look around. He probably sneaked off somewhere when he wasn't looking. That pissed him off even more. Was he running away now? After shoving all this CRP in his face? That effort. When Katsuki's eyes caught Mina, the girl gave him a thumbs up and a tight-lipped smile, then pointed behind her. The blonde sneered back in reply then took off, his tank top clinging to his sweaty back as he made his way through a door that led further into the warehouse. He came to a halt as he noticed the green-haired teen leaning onto a wall in the corridor, hands rubbing at his eyes harshly when he noticed Katsuki coming. The door behind the blonde slid shut with an audible click. No need to cry over a loss, Deku, he said, sounding a lot softer than he intended. He cleared his throat and tried again. We need to talk. Yeah. Deku's voice came as a sigh, sounding defeated. Katsuki didn't like it one bit. He decided to walk closer then, noting how the other's shoulders tensed with every step he took. They both stayed quiet for a minute or so, with Katsuki searching his friends, rivals, Crush's features for something, and with Deku determinedly staring down at the old, dirty tiles of the corridor, like he was hoping they would give him a way out. Katsuki scoffed. What the F, Deku? He couldn't help but sound utterly ruined and angry as he spoke. All those emotions he buried during the dance-off started resurfacing in a rapid manner, and it took almost all his self-control to stay relatively calm. The freckled teen still flinched, but then seemed to relax, gathering his confidence. Deku slowly lifted his gaze from the floor, locking onto Katsuki's. I'm sorry I kept this a secret from you, Kacchan, he said, voice quiet but unwavering. You have every right to be angry for that, but you had no reason to act like a total JRK to me. Huh? Katsuki yelled, coming dangerously close to punching the nerd. He opted for slamming his fist into the wall next to Deku's green curls instead, fury boiling in his guts as he thought back to the last few weeks. I had no reason. You have been lying to me for years. Pretending to be a useless little Deku even though you were so much more. You've been lying to me. Leading me on. He gritted his teeth angrily, trying not to reveal too much. He'd never been good with emotions. Do you know how up that is? He slammed his fist into the wall again in emphasis, Deku's large green eyes widening in surprise. I thought we were over this, Deku looked away. Me too. His voice grew even quieter than before. Remember what I said when I went to your place? Katsuki narrowed his eyes but kept quiet. His heart started beating faster. He knew where this was going. Deku continued. I wanted to come clean that day. Tell you about my secret, he said, voice catching as tears welled up in his eyes, quickly rolling down his cheeks in fat drops. About the dancing, about my YouTube channel? And you shot me down? Deku suddenly yelled, his wet face scrunched up in anger as he glared up at Katsuki. The blonde was mesmerized by the sight, unable to do anything but watch the train wreck happen. You said you already knew, and that you didn't want anything to do with me. Katsuki pressed his lips in a tight line, not trusting himself to reply. He just needed to hear Deku out. No matter how angry he was for being lied to, he really did F up these last few weeks, didn't he? I thought you hated me, Deku said, his anger simmering down into sadness once again. I thought I lost you forever because you found out that I'm dance for all, because I'm not good enough to be by your side? So you can imagine my surprise when I realized that no, you actually haven't figured out anything. The green-haired teen looked wild and lost as he searched Katsuki's eyes for something. You didn't know anything and yet, you shut the door in my face. You cut me off. All for nothing. I thought we were becoming better friends. You were just so amazing. You've always been blinding, but this time it felt like you were finally letting me in. And I let it get to me. I got my hopes up. He hiccuped, tears streaming down his face. Even if you don't feel the same way, I thought we could be best friends again. Like we were when we were kids. Katsuki couldn't listen anymore. He heard enough. His heart was racing in his BLD drumming in his ears loudly. He did the only thing that seemed logical at this point, with Deku trapped between his arms, his face splotchy red and wet from crying, shaking from the onslaught of his emotions, angry, defeated, desperate words leaving his lips rapidly as he kept talking. So he leaned down and kissed him. Softly at first, giving the other teen the option to push him away. Deku's voice was muffled against his lips as he froze up in surprise. Then Deku melted against him, opening up and letting him in easily, and Katsuki shivered as the green-haired teen's hands grabbed onto his tank top, pulling him even closer. His tongue shyly moved against Katsuki's, and the blonde couldn't stop himself from leaning even more into Deku's smaller frame, trapping the heat between them. He had no idea it was going to feel this amazing. All other thoughts fled his mind as he kept kissing Deku, taking in his scent, his taste, the shape of his body against him. Katsuki pulled back slowly, eyes never leaving the freckled teen's face. He desperately wanted to keep kissing the nerd. He'd been dreaming about it for so long, but he held back. He still wasn't quite sure where they were standing with each other, but the fact that Deku kissed him back gave him hope. Kacchan? The green-haired teen said, sounding way too out of breath after such a short embrace. Longing burnt viciously in Katsuki's gut as his gaze wandered to Deku's wet, pink lips, and he wanted nothing more than to bite them and make the nerd sound even more wrecked. He asked instead, still looking at the nerd's lips. He looked so delicious. You? He started, stumbling on his own words, like he wasn't quite sure how to voice his thoughts. Kissed me. It was so blunt the blonde couldn't hold back an incredulous snort. Nice observation skills, Deku. But why? I thought it was obvious, Katsuki replied, pushing himself away from Deku in order to get some space between them. He needed that space to be able to think. Spell it out for me, the nerd said, large emerald eyes blinking up at Katsuki innocently, full of hope. He couldn't decide whether Deku was messing with him or not, but he gave in. Like you, idiot. He tried glaring at the freckled teen in front of him but failed miserably, probably looking more turned on than anything. The sight of Deku in front of him, wearing only his CRP top and those yoga pants did something to him that he refused to acknowledge when they were dancing. The nerd had the audacity to look angry. Is that why you acted like such an butt? He said, and Katsuki was taken aback, still not used to hearing Deku swear. He should have been. The nerd had been doing it more frequently since they started hanging out more, but only when he was pissed. Oh my god, it all makes sense now. That's why you were going on about me having a boyfriend. You were jealous. Katsuki flushed red at being called out but didn't deny it, only glaring harder at him. Oh my god, Deku repeated, slumping weakly against the wall, then sliding down until he was sitting on the cold tiles, his face buried in his hands. We're both so goddamn stupid. Katsuki watched the nerd mumble to himself for a few seconds, then squatted down in front of him. Why didn't you tell me? There was no answer for a few seconds, but Katsuki waited patiently. Eventually Deku peeked out from behind his hands and glanced at the blonde, looking like he was weighing his options. I was scared, he said then quietly. I know we made up but I kept remembering all the stuff you said to me when we were kids. I let it get to me. I convinced myself that you'd be ashamed to know that I'm dancing as well. I thought I could never catch up to you. Katsuki reached out and grabbed Deku's hands, gently pulling them away from the nerd's freckled face. The blonde's features softened as he looked at him, face all wet and sad, melancholic. I'm not gonna say this again, so listen carefully, okay? He started, his ruby eyes holding Deku's gaze steadily. You are an amazing dancer. I've never seen someone as strong-working and dedicated as you, and you are talented. I am proud to be able to call you my friend and… He trailed off, embarrassed, breaking eye contact. His palms started sweating, so he quickly let go of Deku's hand that he was still holding for some reason. I am so sorry for how I acted. Deku wasn't saying a word, just stared at him curiously. He had never said so many words at once, but he needed to finish what he started or he was never going to say it. He swallowed nervously. I got suspicious when I saw my jacket in one of your videos, he said finally, deciding to put all his cards on the table. At first I thought someone stole it from you, and then I had this thought that Dance for All was actually you. I quickly convinced myself that there was no way it could have been you, but I had to be sure. And that's why… Deku's eyes widened in realization, like a light bulb going off in his head. The gifts. Yeah. Katsuki pinched the bridge of his nose between his fingers, thinking back to how utterly idiotic he'd been acting. I thought the more clothes you have from me, the more likely it is that you're gonna slip up and wear them in your videos. I realized along the way that I fell for you. His face was getting dangerously hot. He needed to get this over with quickly. It took me just spending a little more time with you to realize my feelings, and then I saw you on a date with Weasel Face and I got so jealous I couldn't think properly. That's when it all went to SHT. When Katsuki looked at Deku's face, the nerd looked absolutely horrified and offended. It wasn't a date. He yelled, voice shrill. He was just giving me advice about my channel. Katsuki rolled his eyes and flicked the nerd on the forehead. It was just the two of you in a cafe. And it looked like he was gonna embrace you. What else was I supposed to think? Oh my god, Kacchan. Deku laughed, looking back at the blonde unbelievingly. He would never embrace me. He has a girlfriend. Katsuki stood up quickly, trying to increase the distance between them, then turned away in an attempt to hide his embarrassed face. How the should I have known? Deku just kept laughing, then his laughter died down and turned into a quiet chuckle. Katsuki spun back to face him, only to see the nerd already up on his feet, taking a few steps to close the distance between them again. Deku reached out and pulled on Katsuki's tank top to get him even closer, fingers playing with the fabric gingerly. He blinked up, features soft and shy. An appealing pink blush spread over his cheeks as he continued. I like you too, Kacchan. I have for a long time. All the tension that Katsuki didn't even realize he was holding left him in an instant, muscles going lax as he gave the green-haired teen a small smile and put his hands on the other's hips, his thumbs touching Deku's heated skin just above his pants. Good, he said, leaning closer. That burning longing caught his insides on fire once again, and he wanted to feel Deku against him. So what now? The other teen asked, his huge emerald eyes searching Katsuki's ruby ones, still looking a bit hesitant. Are we together now? Katsuki's thumbs drew circles on Deku's skin as he hummed, just barely holding back from kissing him again. Sure. Whatever you want, nerd. There was a twinkle in Deku's eyes as he spoke. I want you to embrace me again. Katsuki's grin was predatory. With pleasure. Mina quietly closed the door she was peeking behind from, walking back to the middle of the warehouse. A small, gentle smile was playing on her lips as she gathered Deku's discarded clothes and sat near the entrance, waiting for them to finish. It took them a while to get their SHT together, but at least it all worked out. She pulled out her phone and decided to text Uraraka. She had some great news to break to her, after all.